October 1962. While the world teetered on the brink of nuclear annihilation, a small group of codebreakers worked tirelessly within these walls, deciphering messages that would ultimately prevent catastrophe. 60 years later, Emily Harrison stands before this same house, keys clutched in her trembling hand. 6 months after signing her divorce papers, this 38-year-old woman stares at what's supposed to be her salvation. A 1930s craftsman home in her childhood hometown she hasn't lived in for 20 years. Rain pours down on their shoulders as the creaking door swings open, revealing the musty scent of dampness and something long dead within the walls. Emily doesn't know that these walls contain more than memories and pain. They hide a national secret that could put her family in danger or be the key to rebuilding their lives. As her daughter's foot crashes through a rotting stair, Emily wonders if she's made a terrible mistake. But in the attic of this decaying house lies a forgotten chapter of American history waiting to be uncovered. And with it, a conspiracy that powerful men have worked decades to keep buried. Some homes hold ghosts. This one harbors secrets that change the course of history. Rain hammers against the windshield as Emily Harrison grips the steering wheel of her packed SUV. The wipers struggle against the downpour, revealing glimpses of the dilapidated craftsman home looming ahead. Built in the 1930s, its once proud structure now sags beneath peeling paint and a deteriorating porch. The realtor had used words like charming and full of character. What they should have said was neglected and on the verge of collapse. In the passenger seat, 14-year-old Lily stares resolutely at her phone headphones firmly in place, refusing to acknowledge their arrival. From the back seat, 10-year-old Ethan presses his face against the window, his initial excitement about their new adventure visibly deflating. "Well, here we are," Emily says with forced cheerfulness as she kills the engine. Home sweet home. No one moves. The rain creates a protective barrier between them and the reality waiting outside. "Mom," Ethan finally breaks the silence. "It looks haunted." Emily takes a deep breath. "It's not haunted, honey. It just needs some love." Lily removes one earbud. "I can't believe you made us move here," she mutters. She's still fixed on her phone. 6 months ago, Emily sat across from her lawyer pen, hovering over the divorce papers. "Once you sign, the house goes to him," her lawyer had reminded her. "Are you sure you don't want to fight for it?" Emily had shaken her head. "The kids need stability, not parents draining their college funds on legal fees. I'll figure something out." That something had come in the form of a phone call from her hometown's real estate agent. This property had come on the market, the old Walsh place, a house that had belonged to her grandmother's friend. The price was shockingly low, too low as she was now discovering. "Let's just take a look," Emily says, reaching for the door handle. It's going to be an adventure. The three emerge into the downpour, dashing toward the covered porch. Emily fumbles with the ancient key, finally pushing open the front door. The hinges groan in protest. The smell hits them first, musty damp with a hint of something that died long ago in the walls. The real estate photos had been strategically cropped and filtered, hiding the water stains blooming across the ceiling like yellow flowers. Lily steps inside cautiously, her headphones still firmly in place. "I'm finding my room," she announces, heading straight for the stairs. "Be careful on those stairs," Emily calls after her. The inspector said they might be. A crack and a crash interrupt her as Lily's foot goes straight through a step. Her leg disappears up to her knee in splintered wood. "Mom!" Lily screams, her voice echoing through the empty house. Ethan's eyes widen in fear. "Is the house eating her?" Emily rushes to pull her daughter free, splinters catching on Lily's jeans. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Lily yanks her earbuds out. "This place is a death trap. I hate it here. I hate it." That night, the three of them huddle in sleeping bags in the barren living room. Rain continues to pour, finding its way through at least 3 separate leaks. Emily has placed pots and pans to catch the water, creating an irregular symphony of drips. "Remember when we went camping that time in Yosemite?" Emily tries passing out slices of cold pizza. "This is like that, an indoor camping adventure." Ethan nibbles his pizza. "Except there are no s'mores, and Dad's not here." The words hang in the air like the dust motes visible in the beam of their single working lamp. "Mom," Lily says quietly, "what happens if we can't fix this place? We don't have anywhere else to go, do we?" Emily swallows hard, pushing back the panic that threatens to overflow. "We'll make it work. This house just needs some love." She forces a smile. Besides, your great-grandmother used to visit here all the time. This house has good bones and good memories. We just need to find them again. After the kids have finally fallen asleep, Emily steps onto the sagging porch with her phone trying to find enough signal to make a call. Megan, it's me. I think I've made a terrible mistake. Her best friend's voice is a lifeline across the miles. Talk to me, Em. How bad is it? Remember when I said it needed a little work? I was off by about a century? Emily's voice cracks. The inspector clearly took a bribe. There are structural issues, electrical problems, plumbing disasters. I don't even know where to start. Can you back out, get your money back? I used everything I had from the divorce settlement. If I walk away now, we have nothing. Emily wipes away a tear. I can't let the kids see me fall apart. Lily's already barely speaking to me since the divorce, and Ethan's trying so hard to be brave. The next morning, Emily wakes before the kids. She finds an old broom in a closet and begins sweeping the kitchen. By the time Lily and Ethan stumble downstairs, she has cleared enough space for their camping stove. Pancakes, she announces, flipping one with determined cheerfulness. And I have good news. The water's been turned on, and while the water heater is questionable, we have a functioning bathroom. Sort of. Ethan approaches the pancakes cautiously. Are we really going to live here, Mom? Emily nods. We are, and we're going to make it amazing. After breakfast, we're going to make a plan. Lily pokes at her pancake. I have a plan. Call Dad and tell him this was a mistake. Emily stiffens. Your father has moved on Lily. He and Jessica are starting their new life, and we're starting ours. We didn't ask for a new life, Lily shouts. You and Dad ruined everything, and now you've dragged us to this dump. The silence that follows is broken only by Ethan's small voice. Is that a treehouse out back? Emily turns to follow his gaze through the grimy window. Sure enough, nestled in a massive oak tree are the weathered remains of what had once been a child's hideaway. I think it is, Emily says, grateful for the distraction. Want to check it out after breakfast? Ethan nods eagerly. As they stand beneath the ancient oak later that morning, Emily feels the first genuine smile cross her face. The treehouse is sturdy, far more stable than parts of the main house. Can we fix it up, Mom? Ethan asks, already reaching for the ladder. Careful, Emily cautions. Let me check it first. As she climbs the rickety ladder, testing each rung, Emily feels something she hasn't experienced in months. Possibility. The treehouse is small but solid. It needs new boards, fresh paint, perhaps a real window to replace the cutout square, but it could be saved. That afternoon, Emily makes a phone call. Hello, is this Jack Sullivan? I got your number from the hardware store. I've been told that you're the best contractor in town. I have a project. Well, more like 100 projects. It's the old Walsh place. There's a low whistle on the other end of the line. The Walsh place that's been empty for years. What kind of shape is it in? Emily laughs, a slightly hysterical edge to it. Let's just say we're currently using umbrellas indoors. I can come by tomorrow morning to take a look, Jack offers. But I should warn you, I'm booked with projects for the next few months. I might be able to give you some advice, maybe help with the most urgent issues, but a full renovation. Anything would help at this point, Emily admits. We'll see you tomorrow. That night, as the kids sleep, Emily pulls out her laptop, connecting to the weak signal from her phone's hotspot. She opens a new document and titles it Operation Resurrection. Beneath it, she begins a list. Fix roof urgent. Repair structural damage to stairs and floors. Update electrical. Plumbing issues. Kitchen renovation. Bathroom upgrades. Walls and paint. Landscaping. She stares at the list, the enormity of it making her chest tighten. Then she goes to her banking app and looks at the balance. The last of her divorce settlement after the down payment. It isn't nearly enough. Jack Sullivan is younger than Emily had expected, with capable hands and thoughtful eyes that don't betray any shock as he walks through the house, though she knows it must be worse than many projects he's seen. He wears faded jeans and a simple flannel shirt, rolled up at the sleeves to reveal muscular forearms marked with the occasional scar, the badge of a man who's spent his life building things. His movements are precise, measured like a soldier assessing terrain. The good news, he says after his inspection, is that the foundation is solid. This house was built right the first time. The bad news is pretty much everything else. They stand in what will eventually be the kitchen. Ethan has followed Jack around like a shadow hanging on his every word, while Lily has remained upstairs exploring the bedrooms. So what's the prognosis, Doctor? Can it be saved? Emily tries to keep her tone light. Jack nods slowly. It can, but it's going to take time, money, and a lot of work. He hands her a notepad with his assessment and rough cost estimates. Emily's face must betray her shock at the bottom line. I've broken it down by a priority, Jack adds quickly. The roof has to come first. There's no point doing anything else until that's fixed. I can help you source materials, maybe even get some discounts through my connections. And labor costs? Emily asks hesitantly. Jack glances at Ethan, who is pretending not to listen while examining a loose floorboard. I could work weekends, teach you some basics, so you can do some simpler stuff yourself. That would cut down significantly on cost. Mom, Mom, Lily's voice echoes from upstairs. Come up here, you need to see this. Emily and Jack exchange glances before heading up the precarious staircase. They find Lily in what will be her bedroom, carefully peeling away layers of faded wallpaper. Look what I found underneath. Behind the floral pattern are pencil sketches directly on the plaster. Beautiful drawings of the town as it had looked decades ago, along with notes and dates. One section shows the very house they stood in, labeled Home Sweet Home, 1945. These are amazing, Emily breathes, running her fingers over the lines. There's a signature, Lily points. Eleanor W. Eleanor Walsh, Jack nods. The original owner. She was quite the local character from what I've heard. My grandmother used to talk about her. She's still alive, Emily says. My grandmother's best friend. The real estate agent mentioned she moved to a smaller place in town a few years back. That's why I was drawn to this house. The connection. Lily is still examining the drawings. These are really good. She was talented. It's the most enthusiasm Lily has shown about anything since they had arrived. We should preserve these, Emily decides. When we redo this room, we'll leave this wall as is. It's part of the house's story. That afternoon, as Jack measures the roof for materials, a car pulls up outside. A small elderly woman with perfectly coiffed white hair makes her way carefully up the broken path to the front door. Emily opens it before she can knock. Mrs. Walsh, the older woman's eyes crinkle. Emily Harrison, look at you, all grown up. I'd recognize those eyes anywhere, just like your grandmother's. Emily steps forward to help her up the porch steps. Please come in, though I should warn you the house is in rough shape. Mrs. Walsh waves away her concern. I know exactly what shape it's in, dear. I couldn't take care of it properly these last few years. Arthur, that was my husband, he always handled the maintenance. After he passed, things started to fall apart. She looks around the entrance hall with a curious mix of sadness and acceptance. Rather like I did, I suppose. They settle in the living room where Emily has set up a few folding chairs, the only furniture they currently have besides their sleeping bags. I heard you'd bought the place, Mrs. Walsh continues. People talk in small towns, you know. When I heard it was Margaret's granddaughter, well, I had to come see for myself. She fixes Emily with a knowing look. You're running from something, aren't you? Just like your grandmother did when she first came to town. Emily is taken aback. I didn't know Grandma was running from anything. Mrs. Walsh smiles. Oh, yes. Margaret arrived here in 1952 with a broken engagement behind her and not much else. She thought she'd failed at life. Turned out life was just getting started. She pats Emily's hand. This house has seen its share of new beginnings. Lily appears in the doorway, hovering uncertainly. And who might this young lady be? Mrs. Walsh asks. This is my daughter, Lily, Emily introduces them. Lily, this is Mrs. Walsh. She's the one who drew those pictures upstairs. Mrs. Walsh's eyes light up. You found my drawings? Oh my, I'd forgotten all about those. Arthur was always after me to stop drawing on the walls, but I told him it's our house. Who's to say we can't decorate it how we please? Lily steps forward. They're really good. Did you ever become an artist? In my own small way, Mrs. Walsh replies. I illustrated children's books for years. Nothing famous, mind you, but it brought me joy. She studies Lily. You have an artist's eyes, I can tell. Do you draw? Lily shifts uncomfortably. I used to. Not much anymore. Mrs. Walsh nods thoughtfully. Well, creative wells run dry sometimes. They fill back up when you're ready. She turns to Emily. Now, I didn't just come to reminisce. I've brought you something. She reaches into her large handbag and pulls out a worn leather-bound book. The house diary. Arthur and I recorded everything about this house. When we replaced the water heater, what color we painted each room, where we planted bulbs in the garden. I thought it might help you. Emily accepts the book with reverence. Thank you. This is invaluable. You'll find your grandmother in there too, Mrs. Walsh adds with a twinkle in her eye. She helped us plant the rose garden in '63. And there was the summer of '67 when a tree branch crashed through the upstairs window during a storm, and your grandfather helped Arthur repair it. She rises with some difficulty. I should be going, but I'll be back to check on your progress. This old house deserves people who love it back to life. As Emily walks her to the door, Mrs. Walsh pauses. It gets better, you know. Whatever you're healing from, the cracks don't disappear, but they become part of your story. After she leaves, Emily opens the house diary, finding entries dating back to 1935 when the house was first built. It's a treasure trove of information. Where the water main is located, which windows tend to leak, the composition of the original plaster walls. That evening, while the kids are occupied, Emily climbs to the attic with a flashlight. The house diary had mentioned storage trunks, and she's curious what might remain. The space is dusty and cramped, filled with cobwebs and the skittering sounds of mice. But in the corner, just as described, sit 3 large trunks. The first contains old clothes and linens too moth-eaten to salvage. The second holds Christmas decorations and photo albums that Emily sets aside to examine later. But it's the third trunk that makes her breath catch. Inside is a collection of letters tied with faded ribbons, and on top an envelope addressed in her grandmother's handwriting, to Eleanor, my dearest friend. Emily sits back on her heels, flashlight balanced between her shoulder and chin, as she carefully opens the envelope. My dearest Eleanor, it begins. As I prepare to leave this world, I find myself thinking of our sanctuary. Hours we spent in your kitchen, planning adventures, the afternoons in your garden, sharing our deepest secrets. Your home has been as much a part of my life story as my own. Perhaps someday one of my girls will find her way back to it when she needs a safe harbor, just as I once did. Emily wipes away tears. Had her grandmother somehow known she would end up here? Had some cosmic force guided her back to this specific house? But as she shifts the papers, something metallic clinks against the bottom of the trunk. Emily reaches in and pulls out a strange device. A small radio, but unlike any she's seen before. It's heavier than it looks, with unusual dials and a serial number stamped on the side, USN SIGINT 103. Beneath it lies a manila folder with a faded red stamp, classified. The date on the folder reads October 1962. Emily's brow furrows. She knows that date, the Cuban Missile Crisis. But what would classified material from that era be doing in Mrs. Walsh's attic? As she reaches for the folder, a beam of light sweeps across the attic window. Headlights from a car pulling up outside. Emily quickly returns the folder and radio to the trunk, covering them with the other items. She'll examine them more carefully tomorrow. Downstairs, she finds Jack finishing up his measurements in the kitchen. I think we've got a good plan for the immediate repairs, he says, rolling up his notepad. I can start on the roof this weekend if that works for you. That would be perfect, Emily replies. Her mind still on what she found in the attic. Jack studies her face. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Emily hesitates. Just dust. Lots of dust in the attic. As Jack prepares to leave, he pauses at his truck. There's something I've been meaning to ask. You mentioned your grandmother knew the Walshes well. Emily nods. Yes, they were close friends. Why? Jack seems to choose his words carefully. It's probably nothing. Just, this house has some stories attached to it. Local legends, you might say. What kind of legends? During the Cold War, there were rumors that this place was more than just a family home. Something about radio equipment and late-night visitors. He shrugs. Small town talk, probably nothing to it. But if you find anything unusual, like a strange radio in the attic, Emily blurts out before she can stop herself. Jack's expression shifts almost imperceptibly. You found something. Emily isn't sure why, but she takes a step back. Just old junk. Nothing important. Jack nods, but his eyes linger on her face a moment too long. Well, if you do find anything interesting, I'd be curious to hear about it. I'm a bit of a history buff, especially Cold War era. After he drives away, Emily stands on the porch watching his taillights disappear down the road. Something about their final exchange left her uneasy. Why would Jack be so interested in Cold War artifacts? That night, after the kids are asleep, Emily returns to the attic. She retrieves the folder from the trunk and carefully opens it. Inside are technical documents, most filled with terms she doesn't understand. Signal frequencies, decryption protocols, and references to something called Project Mongoose. But what catches her eye is a black and white photograph paper-clipped to one of the reports. It shows a group of men and one woman standing in front of what appears to be a military installation. The woman is clearly a younger Eleanor Walsh, and standing beside her is Grandpa, Emily whispers, recognizing her grandfather Robert Taylor, a man she'd only known as a quiet, bookish high school history teacher. But here he is, in what looks like a military uniform, his arm around Eleanor Walsh. On the back of the photo, someone has written, SIGINT Team 103, Harvest Moon Station, 1962. Emily's phone buzzes, making her jump. A text from Megan. How's the House of Horrors? She quickly responds, weird. Found something in the attic. Call you tomorrow. As she's about to put her phone away, she notices she has no cell service. Strange, since she'd had at least one bar earlier, yet the text somehow went through. A floorboard creaks somewhere in the house. Emily freezes, listening intently. The old house makes plenty of noises on its own, but this sounded different, deliberate, like a footstep. She switches off her flashlight and waits in the darkness, heart pounding. Another creak, closer this time, coming from the stairs leading to the attic. Emily presses herself against the wall, clutching her phone like a weapon. A beam of light sweeps across the floor. Mom, Ethan's voice calls out. Are you up here? Relief floods through her. Ethan, you scared me half to death. What are you doing awake? Her son's face appears in the attic, opening, illuminated from below by his dinosaur nightlight. I heard noises. I thought maybe the house was haunted. Emily moves to help him up the last few steps. No ghosts, honey. Just me being nosy about what the previous owners left behind. Ethan looks around the attic with wide eyes. Find any treasure. Emily thinks of the classified folder and the strange radio. Just old photos and Christmas decorations. Nothing exciting. As they descend the stairs together, Emily can't shake the feeling they're being watched. At the bottom of the stairs, she pauses, looking toward the front of the house. Through the curtainless window, she catches a glimpse of movement, a shadow passing under the streetlight. She hurries to the window, but the street outside is empty. The next morning, Emily wakes to the sound of hammering. She finds Jack already on the roof working on the most damaged section. Ethan stands below, handing up tools when called for, his face bright with excitement at being included. Lily emerges from her room around noon, sketchbook in hand, the first time Emily has seen it since before the divorce. Mrs. Walsh said she'd show me some of her illustration techniques, Lily announces, avoiding eye contact. If that's okay. Of course it's okay, Emily says, trying to contain her surprise and delight. That's wonderful, Lily. As Lily leaves for Mrs. Walsh's apartment in town, Emily returns to the attic. The classified folder and radio are exactly where she left them, but something feels off. She can't put her finger on it, but it's as if the contents have been disturbed, arranged slightly differently than she remembers. Emily carefully removes the radio and examines it more closely in the daylight. It's clearly military-grade equipment, much more sophisticated than a civilian radio from the 1960s. The model number and U.S. and SIGINT designations suggest naval intelligence. Her grandfather had been in the Navy during World War II, but as far as Emily knew, he'd been a supply officer, nothing classified or high level. He'd never mentioned any involvement in intelligence work or the Cuban Missile Crisis. Emily pulls out her phone and searches for USN SIGINT 103. Nothing relevant appears. She tries Harvest Moon Station 1962 and again finds no results. She takes a photo of the radio and the group picture, then carefully returns everything to the trunk. She'll ask Mrs. Walsh about it when the time feels right. That evening, Jack stays late, helping Emily patch a leaking pipe in the downstairs bathroom. You military? Emily asks, casually, noticing the way he handles tools with practiced precision. Jack pauses. Navy, how'd you guess? The way you move. My ex was Army. You develop an eye for it. 12 years, Jack confirms. Naval Engineering Corps. Nothing glamorous. What brought you back here? Family. My dad got sick, came back to help, ended up staying. He tightens a fitting and tests the pipe. What brings you back to your hometown after all these years? Emily considers how much to share. Divorce, fresh start, cheap house. Jack nods, understanding the unspoken parts. Your grandfather was military too, wasn't he? The question seems innocent enough, but something in Jack's tone makes Emily cautious. Navy, World War II. He never talked much about it. Why can't long? Just making conversation, Jack says, but his eyes linger on her a moment too long. Small town. People remember things. After dinner with the kids occupied with a board game, Emily takes out her phone to call Megan. Still no service inside the house. She steps onto the porch where she usually gets at least one bar. As she waits for the call to connect, Emily notices a dark sedan parked down the street. It wasn't there earlier. The windows are tinted, making it impossible to see who might be inside. Megan answers on the third ring. Em, how's the renovation from hell? Weird, Meg, really weird. Emily keeps her voice low, glancing at the sedan. I found something in the attic. Classified documents from the 60s, Cuban Missile Crisis era, and a photo of my grandfather with people I didn't know he knew in what looks like a military setting. Your grandfather, the high school teacher. That's just it. I don't think he was just a teacher. There's a strange radio, too military grade. And get this, the contractor who's helping us, he keeps asking odd questions about my grandfather. Emily, Megan's voice turns serious. Be careful. If you found legitimate classified material, even old stuff, that could be a federal offense. They're from 1962, Meg. It's ancient history. Still, maybe you should turn whatever you found over to the proper authorities. Emily watches as the dark sedan's engine starts. Maybe. Look, I have to go. I'll call you tomorrow. She ends the call as the sedan pulls away from the curb, driving slowly past the house. Emily catches a glimpse of the driver, a middle-aged man in a dark suit, before the car accelerates down the street. Back inside, Emily finds Ethan asleep on the couch, the game abandoned. Lily sits nearby, sketching quietly. Everything okay? Emily asks, noting the unusual peace between her children. Lily shrugs. Ethan wore himself out helping Mr. Sullivan. He's not so annoying when he's exhausted. Emily smiles at the backhanded compliment. What are you drawing? Lily hesitates, then turns her sketchbook. It's a detailed rendering of one of the wall drawings from her bedroom, a map of the town from 1945, but with additions and modifications. Mrs. Walsh helped me understand some of the markings, Lily explains. See these symbols? They're not just decorations. They mean something. Emily examines the drawing more closely. What she had taken for artistic embellishments do seem to form a pattern. Small triangles, circles, and dashes arranged around certain buildings. Did Mrs. Walsh say what they mean? Not exactly. She got kind of vague. Said they were a special code she and her friends used. Lily points to a specific symbol near the town hall. But this one, she said, it marks a listening post, whatever that means. Emily feels a chill. A listening post. SIGINT, signal intelligence. The radio in the attic. Lily, did Mrs. Walsh mention anything about your great-grandfather, about him working with her? Lily shakes her head. No, should she have? I'm not sure, Emily says, studying the map. I found some old photos in the attic. He knew Mrs. Walsh, apparently. That night, Emily dreams of radio static and whispered voices speaking in code. She wakes at 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps on the porch. Grabbing her phone as a makeshift weapon, she creeps downstairs. The front door is still locked, but a white envelope has been slipped underneath. Emily retrieves it with trembling fingers. Inside is a single business card. James Coleman, Colonel, U.S. Army retired, and a phone number. On the back, handwritten, about Robert Taylor. Call soon. Robert Taylor, her grandfather. Emily tucks the card into her pocket and checks all the doors and windows before returning to bed. Sleep eludes her for the remainder of the night. The next morning, Jack arrives early with lumber for the porch repairs. Emily watches him work through the kitchen window, wondering if she can trust him with what she's found. Something tells her to wait. Instead, she drives into town, parking outside the small public library. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Patterson, brightens when Emily introduces herself. Margaret's granddaughter. My goodness, you look just like her. What can I help you with, dear? I'm researching local history, Emily explains, specifically anything about the town during the Cold War, the late 50s, early 60s. Mrs. Patterson's smile falters slightly. Any particular aspect, military presence, communications facilities, anything like that? How curious, you should ask. Mrs. Patterson leads her to a filing cabinet in the back room. We don't have much officially documented, but I've maintained a local history collection. She pulls out a thin folder labeled Cold War Era Miscellaneous. The military maintained several facilities in the region during that time. Officially, they were weather stations or radio relays. Unofficially, she shrugs. Well, people had their suspicions. The folder contains newspaper clippings, mostly mundane articles about community events. But one catches Emily's eye, a photo of a group breaking ground for a new regional weather research facility in 1958. Standing among the officials is her grandfather, identified in the caption as Robert Taylor, Scientific Liaison. Scientific Liaison, Emily murmurs. He was a high school teacher. Mrs. Patterson peers over her shoulder. Oh yes, Robert Taylor, brilliant man. Taught history but knew more about mathematics and radio technology than anyone in town. During the summers, he'd disappear for weeks at a time. Professional development, he called it. Did you know him well? As well as anyone did, I suppose. He kept to himself mostly. Very close with the Walshes, though, Eleanor and Arthur. The three of them were thick as thieves. Mrs. Patterson lowers her voice. There were rumors, of course, the late-night gatherings at the Walsh house, the unusual equipment deliveries. But in those days, people didn't ask too many questions. It was patriotic to mind your own business. Emily makes copies of the relevant articles, thanking Mrs. Patterson for her help. As she turns to leave, the librarian calls after her. If you're really interested in that period, you should talk to James Coleman. He retired here a few years back. Military man, knew your grandfather, I believe. Emily's hand moves to the business card in her pocket. Do you know where I can find him? The Veterans Hall on Main Street. He's usually there Wednesday afternoons for the chess club. Today is Wednesday. The Veterans Hall is a modest brick building flying both the American flag and the POWMAA flag. Inside, the wood-paneled walls are lined with photographs of local service members and memorabilia from various conflicts. In the back room, several elderly men huddle around chessboards. Emily scans the room, unsure which might be Colonel Coleman. Looking for someone, a voice behind her makes her turn. The man standing there is tall and straight-backed despite his age, which Emily puts at late 60s or early 70s. His white hair is cut in a military-style crew cut, and his piercing blue eyes assess her with calm intelligence. Colonel Coleman, Emily ventures. Ms. Harrison, he confirms. I've been expecting you. Shall we talk? Outside the park across the street offers more privacy. Emily follows him, questions swirling in her mind. How does he know her name? How did he find her house? They settle on a bench beneath a large oak tree, reminiscent of the one in Emily's backyard. You look like him, Coleman says without preamble. Your grandfather. Same eyes. You knew him well. He saved my life, more than once. Coleman studies her face. How much do you know about Robert's work during the Cold War? Nothing until 3 days ago. I found some items in the attic of the Walsh house. I bought it recently. Coleman nods. Eleanor reached out to me, said you might need guidance. Guidance about what? What was my grandfather involved in? Coleman looks around, ensuring no one is within earshot. Have you heard of SIGINT? Signal intelligence. I saw it on a radio I found. Your grandfather wasn't just a high school teacher, Ms. Harrison. He was one of the most brilliant cryptanalysts the Navy ever produced. During World War II, he worked on breaking Japanese naval codes. After the war, when most went back to civilian life, he was recruited for a special program. What kind of program? The kind that officially didn't exist. A joint NSA naval intelligence operation codenamed Harvest Moon, a network of listening posts designed to intercept and decode Soviet communications. Emily struggles to reconcile this information with the quiet, bookish man she remembers. But he was a history teacher in a small town. The perfect cover. The Walsh house was an unofficial station in the network. Eleanor was a decoder herself, one of the few women in the program. Arthur Walsh provided technical expertise. The three of them formed one of our most effective units, especially during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Emily's mind reels with this information. But why here in this small town? Location. The geographical features created a unique atmospheric condition that allowed for clearer signal reception from certain Soviet frequencies. Plus, a small town where nothing ever happened was the last place anyone would look for a high-level intelligence operation. Emily thinks of the strange radio, the classified documents. I found materials in the attic, military radio equipment, files marked classified. Coleman's expression grows serious. That's concerning. Those materials should have been collected decades ago. Why weren't they? After the crisis ended, priorities shifted. Stations were decommissioned, personnel reassigned. Some materials fell through the cracks. The fact that you found them suggests they were deliberately hidden, not overlooked. A thought occurs to Emily. The contractor working on my house, Jack Sullivan, he keeps asking questions about my grandfather, about the house's history. He said he was Naval Engineering Corps. Coleman's eyes narrow. Sullivan, I don't know him, but I can make inquiries. In the meantime, be careful what you share. If he was naval engineering, he might recognize the equipment for what it is. Should I be worried? Probably not, but those documents might contain sensitive information even after all these years. Intelligence agencies have long memories. Emily thinks of the dark sedan that had been watching her house. Someone slipped your card under my door last night. Was that you? Coleman shakes his head. I gave my card to Eleanor to pass along. I never came to your house. A chill runs down Emily's spine. Then who was at my house in the middle of the night? I don't know, but I suggest you secure whatever you found until I can arrange for proper handling. He scribbles on the back of another business card. This is my home address. If you feel unsafe, bring the materials to me directly. What exactly did my grandfather do during the Cuban Missile Crisis? Emily asks. Coleman hesitates. That's complicated. Let's just say he played a more significant role than history records. The full story is still classified. As they part ways, Emily notices a dark sedan parked across from the Veterans Hall. It resembles the one she saw near her house the previous night. Instead of returning home immediately, Emily drives to Mrs. Walsh's apartment complex. The elderly woman welcomes her warmly, but Emily notices she seems more frail than during her visit to the house. I met Colonel Coleman today. What did he tell you? That my grandfather was a crypt analyst, that you were too, that my house was some kind of secret listening post during the Cold War. Not the whole house, just a section of the basement we modified. The rest was our actual home where we raised our children, hosted dinner parties, lived our lives. Why didn't anyone in the family know? Why keep it secret all these years? The work we did, it wasn't just classified, Emily. It existed in a gray area. Some of the methods we used, some of the decisions made, they wouldn't stand up well to public scrutiny even now. What decisions? What did you do? Your grandfather kept certain materials, didn't he? That's why Coleman is involved. Documents, a radio. Did you find the recordings? Recordings, no. Good. Those should remain buried. Some secrets protect people, Emily. Some truths are too dangerous even decades later. I don't understand. You will. But ask yourself this. Are you prepared for how the truth might change how you see him, how you see your family's legacy? Before Emily can press further, Mrs. Walsh is overcome by a coughing fit. It takes several minutes for her to recover, and when she does, she seems exhausted. I should rest now, but come back tomorrow. There's more you should know before you decide what to do. Driving home, Emily's mind buzzes with questions. What recordings was Mrs. Walsh referring to? What decisions could still be dangerous? After more than 60 years, she pulls into her driveway to find Jack's truck still there, though it's well past the time he usually leaves. Inside, she finds him in the kitchen with Ethan sharing sandwiches. Hope you don't mind. Ethan was hungry and I had some extra lunch. Of course not. Thank you for feeding him. We made progress on the porch today, and I took a look at that treehouse. The structure is surprisingly sound. We could have it safe for use by the weekend. Mom, can we paint it blue? Mr. Sullivan says blue is a good color for a command center. Command center. Every kid needs a headquarters, especially one with a clear view of the approach to the house. That night, Emily returns to the attic with renewed purpose. She carefully examines every inch of the third trunk, looking for hidden compartments where recordings might be concealed. Finding nothing, she turns her attention to the radio. The back panel is secured with small screws. Using a knife from the kitchen, Emily carefully removes them and lifts the panel. Inside, nestled among the vacuum tubes and wiring, is a small, flat metal container. Emily pries it open to find several miniature reels of magnetic tape, each labeled with dates from October 1962, the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. She has no way to play them, but their presence confirms Mrs. Walsh's hint. These must be the recordings she mentioned, records of intercepted communications perhaps, or logs of the crypt analyst's work. Emily's hands shake as she returns the tapes to their hiding place. Whatever is on these recordings, both Mrs. Walsh and Colonel Coleman seem concerned about their discovery. As she reassembles the radio, Emily hears the distinct sound of a car engine idling outside. Moving to the small attic window, she peers through the dusty glass. The dark sedan from earlier is parked across the street, headlights off. As she watches, a figure emerges from the driver's side, a man in a dark suit. He stands for a moment, looking directly at the house, then reaches into his jacket. Emily ducks instinctively, heart pounding. When she risks another look, the man is walking toward her house, something in his hand that she can't quite identify in the darkness. Panic floods her system. Her children are asleep downstairs, vulnerable. Emily quickly secures the radio in the trunk and descends the attic stairs as quietly as possible. She checks on Lily and Ethan, both still sleeping soundly, then positions herself near the front door, peering through the side light. The man stands on her porch now, studying the house carefully. In his hand is not a weapon, as Emily had feared, but what appears to be some kind of electronic device. He holds it up, sweeping it across the front of the house, then consults a small screen on the device. He's scanning for something. Radio signals, electronic surveillance. Emily isn't sure, but his methodical approach suggests professional training. Government, military, or something else entirely. The man seems to reach a decision. He pockets the device and approaches the door. Emily retreats to the shadows, watching as an envelope slides beneath the door. Just like Colonel Coleman's card had appeared the previous night, the man returns to his car and drives away. Emily waits several minutes to ensure he's truly gone before retrieving the envelope. Inside is a typed note. The tapes contain sensitive information. For your family's safety, call this number. Below is a phone number with a Washington, D.C. area code. No signature, no agency identification, just the ominous warning and the number. Emily takes the envelope to the kitchen and examines it under the bright light. No return address or postmark, no fingerprints visible on the glossy paper. The note itself is printed on standard office paper, nothing to identify its source. She considers calling the number immediately, but hesitates. Who exactly would she be contacting? And what would they want from her? The card from Colonel Coleman feels more trustworthy, somehow coming through Mrs. Walsh's connection to her grandfather. Emily makes a decision. She'll speak with Mrs. Walsh again tomorrow, then decide whether to contact Coleman or the mysterious number, or neither. The next morning brings chaos. A violent storm has swept through the area overnight, and Emily wakes to the sound of water dripping. No pouring into the kitchen. The recently patched roof has failed against the onslaught of wind and rain. She rushes downstairs to find Ethan already placing buckets and pots to catch the worst leaks. The weather guy said it was supposed to be a small thunderstorm. He says, his voice betraying both worry and excitement. But it's a huge storm, Mr. Sullivan called and said he's coming over as soon as he can get through the flooded roads. Lily emerges from her room, hair tousled from sleep. Great, now we're living in a waterfall. Emily surveys the damage, pushing down rising panic. Water stains spread across the ceiling, like disease drips forming in new locations even as she watches. The financial implications are devastating. They'd barely secured funding for the planned repairs, let alone this new disaster. Okay, team, she says with forced optimism. Let's set up a bucket brigade. Anything that can hold water, bring it to the living room. We'll prioritize the worst leaks. As they scramble to contain the damage, Emily's phone rings. Mrs. Walsh's number. Emily, dear. The elderly woman's voice sounds strained. I've taken a fall. Nothing too serious, but they're taking me to the hospital for observation. Could you come by later today? I need to speak with you urgently. Of course. Is there anyone with you now? Do you need anything? The building manager is here. They've called an ambulance. But Emily listened carefully. The basement. Check beneath the workbench. Robert installed a safe behind the pegboard. The combination is your grandmother's birthday, month, day, year. The call ends abruptly. Emily stares at her phone, the cryptic instructions adding to her mounting anxiety. A safe in the basement, more secrets. Jack arrives an hour later, soaked to the skin, but immediately taking charge. He climbs onto the roof despite the continuing rain, securing a tarp over the worst section to mitigate further damage. The storm shifted course overnight, he explains, accepting the towel Emily offers when he finally comes inside. Meteorologists completely missed it. Half the town is flooded. Emily watches him work, his competence reassuring despite the circumstances. Can she trust him with what she's found with Mrs. Walsh hospitalized, and Coleman's warnings about Jack's interest in her grandfather still fresh? She decides to keep the latest developments to herself for now. The basement's starting to flood, Lily announces from the doorway. Water's coming up through the floor drain. Show me, Jack says, following Lily toward the basement stairs. Emily feels a spike of anxiety. The basement, where Mrs. Walsh said to look for a safe, where, according to Coleman, the unofficial station had been located. She follows them down to find water pooling across the concrete floor, seeping up through a central drain and under the exterior wall. Jack immediately locates the source, a blocked drainage pipe that needs to be cleared from outside. I've got equipment in my truck, he says, already heading back upstairs. We need to get this water out before it damages the foundation. Emily scans the basement as Jack leaves. Along one wall stands a heavy workbench, its pegboard backing covered with ancient rusting tools. Is this where her grandfather hid a safe? It looks undisturbed, possibly for decades. Mom, look at this, Ethan calls, pointing to something floating in the rising water. It looks like a door. Indeed, a small wooden trap door has become partially visible as the water has lifted it from its setting in the concrete floor. It's roughly 2 feet square with a recessed metal handle, a door Emily would never have noticed under normal conditions. Don't touch it, she says automatically, her mind racing. A hidden door in the basement floor. What had Coleman said about the unofficial station? That it was a section of the basement they modified. Mom, there's more water coming in. Lily's panicked voice draws Emily's attention away from the mysterious door. Water is now pouring in and from a corner of the basement, rapidly raising the level across the floor. They spend the next several hours in a desperate battle against the elements. Jack returns with a commercial-grade pump, and with the help of a few neighbors who've heard about their plight, they manage to divert the worst of the flooding away from the house. By afternoon, the rain finally slackens, and the immediate crisis has passed. The basement water level has receded, though a layer of silt and debris remains. Emily seizes a moment alone in the basement to examine the trapdoor more closely. It's secured with a simple latch, not locked. She hesitates, then pulls it open, revealing a set of narrow concrete steps descending into darkness below. A basement beneath the basement. Exactly the kind of hidden space perfect for covert operations. Emily checks to ensure she's still alone, then grabs a flashlight from the workbench and descends the steps. The air grows cooler and damper as she moves down the beam of her flashlight, cutting through absolute darkness. At the bottom, she finds herself in a small room, perhaps 10 feet square. One wall is lined with what appears to be electronic equipment, ancient by modern standards but clearly sophisticated for its era. Radio receivers, transmitters, a teletype machine, and other devices Emily doesn't recognize. This must be the Harvest Moon Station from the photograph, the listening post where her grandfather, Mrs. Walsh, and others intercepted and decoded Soviet communications during the Cold War. Emily's flashlight beam catches a metal filing cabinet in the corner. She approaches it, finding it unlocked. Inside are more folders marked classified, organized by date and subject. Most are labeled with cryptic designations. Red Wing, Blackstone, Mongoose. She selects one folder at random, Anna Deer OCT 1962, and opens it to find pages of handwritten notes and typewritten transcripts, many in Russian with English translations alongside. The content appears to be intercepted communications related to Soviet missile deployments in Cuba. Operation Anadir, the Soviet code name for the missile placement that triggered the crisis. Find anything interesting. Jack's voice from the top of the stairs makes Emily nearly drop the folder. She turns to find him standing at the trapdoor, silhouetted against the dim light from the basement above. Jack, I was just exploring. A secret room beneath the basement. Impressive. He descends the steps, flashlight in hand. Though not entirely surprising given what I've heard about this house. Emily clutches the folder, uncertain how to respond. Jack's gaze moves past her to the equipment along the wall. ANGRC 109, he says, identifying one of the radio sets. SSTR-1, Special Operations Transceiver, standard issue for covert communications in the early 60s. Your grandfather had quite the setup here. You recognize this equipment. Naval Engineering Corps, remember. Part of my training included the history of military communications technology. Jack steps closer, examining the filing cabinet. These look like operational records. Probably should have been destroyed or transferred to secure archives decades ago. Emily takes a step back, putting distance between them. What do you really want, Jack? Why are you so interested in my grandfather, in this house? Jack studies her face, then sighs. My grandfather was Captain William Sullivan, USS Randolph. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was tracking Soviet submarines near the blockade line. On October 27, 1962, he received an unusual message, not through official channels, but via a frequency that wasn't supposed to exist. That message warned him about a Soviet submarine preparing to launch a nuclear torpedo. What does that have to do with my grandfather? The message originated from a station codenamed Harvest Moon. My grandfather's log records receiving critical intelligence that saved his ship and possibly prevented nuclear escalation. But when he reported the information up the chain of command, he was ordered to forget the source. The official record was sanitized, the warning credited to standard naval intelligence. You think my grandfather sent that warning? I know he did. What I don't know is what he intercepted to make him send it, or why records of those intercepts disappeared from official archives. Emily's mind reels with this new information. So you took this renovation job to, spy on me, search my house? I took this job because I'm genuinely a contractor. But yes, when I heard Robert Taylor's granddaughter had bought the Walsh house, I made sure I was the one who got the call. Jack's expression softens. I'm not your enemy, Emily. I've been trying to piece this story together for years, to understand what my grandfather was part of, to honor his memory. Before Emily can respond, the house above them shudders with the impact of a heavy door slamming. Footsteps move across the floor, multiple sets moving with purpose. Mom, Ethan's voice calls, tinged with anxiety. There are people here. Emily and Jack exchange alarmed glances, then hurry up the stairs. In the kitchen stand two men in dark suits, the same style as the man who delivered the mysterious envelope. Between them is a third man, older, with silver hair, in the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Mrs. Harrison, the older man says, producing identification. Agent Frank Donovan, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to speak with you regarding certain materials that may be in your possession. Emily feels her heart rate accelerate. Do you have a warrant? Not yet, Donovan admits. We were hoping to resolve this matter informally. Items of national security interest may have been left in this house. Classified materials that should have been secured decades ago. Jack steps forward. I'm Jack Sullivan, the contractor working on Ms. Harrison's renovation. What specific items are you looking for? Donovan eyes Jack with suspicion. This is a matter between the Bureau and Ms. Harrison. I suggest you leave, Mr. Sullivan. He stays, Emily says firmly, surprising herself with her boldness. This is my house, and he's here at my invitation. Donovan's expression hardens slightly. Very well. Ms. Harrison, we have reason to believe this property contains classified materials related to intelligence operations during the Cuban Missile Crisis, specifically recordings and documents from an operation codenamed Harvest Moon. And if such materials existed, what would the FBI want with them after 60 years? Their classified status has never been rescinded. Possession of such materials by unauthorized persons remains a federal offense regardless of the time elapsed. Emily notices one of the younger agents scanning the kitchen, his gaze lingering on the basement door. These men know exactly what they're looking for. I just bought this house, Emily says carefully. I've been focused on fixing the roof and the plumbing, not digging through old storage. If there are classified materials here, I'm unaware of them. It's a careful evasion, not technically a lie. Donovan clearly doesn't believe her. Ms. Harrison, I understand your grandfather was Robert Taylor, correct? Yes. And you're aware of his work during the Cold War. My grandfather was a high school history teacher. Donovan's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Among other things, Ms. Harrison, I'm going to be direct. We know this house contained a SIGINT station during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We know your grandfather operated that station alongside Eleanor and Arthur Walsh. And we strongly suspect that certain recordings made during a critical period in October 1962 were hidden here rather than being turned over to proper authorities. Why now? Jack interjects. Why come looking for 60-year-old intelligence materials now? National security concerns don't expire, Mr. Sullivan, especially when they involve unauthorized communications during the most dangerous nuclear standoff in history. Emily's mind races. What had Mrs. Walsh said? Some secrets protect people. Some truths are too dangerous, even decades later. And Coleman's warning about the recordings, that they contained evidence of direct communications between American and Soviet officers that bypassed official channels. If I found anything resembling classified material, Emily says carefully, I would of course turn it over to proper authorities. But I would need verification of your identity and authority to receive such materials. A prudent approach, Donovan concedes. Here's my card. When you locate the materials, and I believe you will, call me directly. We can arrange a formal transfer of custody. His tone hardened slightly. I should note that destroying or concealing classified information is a serious federal offense. We would prefer to handle this discreetly, but we are prepared to pursue more formal measures if necessary. The implied threat hangs in the air as Donovan and his agents depart. Through the window, Emily watches them climb into their government-issue sedan, the same vehicle she's seen watching her house. They know exactly what's here, Jack says quietly, and they're not the only ones interested. That envelope you received last night, not from the FBI. Emily turns to him startled. How did you know about the envelope? Because I was watching your house too. After our conversation about your grandfather, I was concerned about who else might come looking for what's hidden here. Lily appears in the doorway, Ethan closed behind her. Mom, who were those men? Emily hesitates, unsure how much to share with her children. Government officials. They think there might be some historically important items in the house. Like the radio in the attic, Ethan asks innocently, in the secret room downstairs. Jack kneels to Ethan's levels. Exactly like those. Your great-grandfather left some very interesting things behind, and different people are interested in them for different reasons. Are we in trouble? Lily asks, her usual teenage defiance replaced by genuine concern. No, Emily assures her, though she's far from certain. But we do need to be careful. I need to visit Mrs. Walsh in the hospital. Jack, would you mind staying with the kids? Of course, we'll continue drying out the basement. His eyes communicate what he doesn't say aloud. He'll ensure no one else accesses the hidden room while she's gone. At the small community hospital, Emily finds Mrs. Walsh in a private room looking frail against the white sheets, but mentally alert. You came, the elderly woman says, grasping Emily's hand with surprising strength. Did you find it, the safe? Not yet, but I found the room beneath the basement, and the FBI found me. They're looking for recordings from October 1962. Mrs. Walsh's expression darkens. I was afraid of this. James Coleman contacted me, said there's been renewed interest in Harvest Moon from multiple agencies. It's why I reached out to you about the safe. What's in it? What are these recordings that have everyone so concerned? Mrs. Walsh glances toward the door, ensuring they're alone. Evidence of what really happened during the darkest hours of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The history books say we came close to nuclear war. They don't know how close or what really prevented it. Jack Sullivan says his grandfather received a warning from Harvest Moon, a warning that wasn't through official channels. William Sullivan, USS Randolph? Yes. Mrs. Walsh nods slowly. One of several Navy commanders who received direct communications from us. But the full story is more complicated, more problematic for certain interests. What full story? The bridge. Mrs. Walsh's voice drops to a near whisper. A network of officers on both sides, American and Soviet, communicating directly outside official, trying to prevent catastrophe when political leaders seem determined to blunder into war. Emily struggles to process this. Are you saying my grandfather was secretly communicating with Soviet officers during the crisis? Not just your grandfather, a small group on both sides who recognized the madness unfolding. We called ourselves the Bridge because we spanned the divide when official diplomacy was failing. That sounds like treason. Emily says the word itself, feeling like a betrayal of her grandfather's memory. To some, yes. To others, the highest form of patriotism. When political leaders are paralyzed by pride and ideology, sometimes the duty to humanity transcends national loyalty. Mrs. Walsh's eyes are fierce despite her physical frailty. We saved millions of lives, Emily. Perhaps billions. History records Vasily Arkhipov as the Soviet officer who refused to authorize a nuclear torpedo launch when his submarine was cornered by American destroyers. What history doesn't record is why he stood firm when others wanted to fire. The warning from Harvest Moon, a direct communication to Soviet intelligence officers we had contacted previously. Men who, like us, feared their leaders were sleepwalking into Armageddon. They relayed our message to Arkhipov that American officers were working to de-escalate, that nuclear war hadn't begun, that there was still hope for a peaceful resolution. And the recordings, evidence of these communications, proof that the bridge existed, that officers on both sides worked together without authorization. Mrs. Walsh's grip on Emily's hand tightens. Some would call it collaboration with the enemy. Others would recognize it as the moment when common humanity transcended Cold War divisions. Why keep recordings at all? If what you did was so controversial, why preserve the evidence? Your grandfather insisted, said someday the world should know the truth, not to assign blame, but to understand that even at the height of the Cold War, individuals on both sides recognized their shared interest in survival. He believed it might provide a model for preventing future conflicts. Emily thinks of the FBI agents of the mysterious envelope of Coleman's warnings. And now different factions want these recordings for different reasons. Exactly. Some to bury the truth forever, some to exploit it for contemporary political purposes. And a few who share your grandfather's vision, that the full story should be told when the time is right. How do I know which is which? Who can I trust? Mrs. Walsh's expression turns grave. That's the question, isn't it? The FBI wants the recordings to ensure they remain classified indefinitely. Institutional instinct to protect reputations and maintain the official narrative. The CIA likely wants them to evaluate what intelligence advantages might have been compromised. And others, she trails off, seemingly reluctant to continue. Others, there were Soviet officers involved in the bridge, Emily, men who risked everything to prevent nuclear war. Some survived the fall of the Soviet Union, or their descendants did. They too have interest in how this history is told, whether as a story of treachery or of heroism that transcended ideology. Emily feels overwhelmed by the implications. Her grandfather, the quiet history teacher she thought she knew, had been part of a covert network operating outside official channels during history's most dangerous nuclear standoff. The safe, Mrs. Walsh continues, Robert installed it in 1963 after the official Harvest Moon operation was decommissioned. It contains the most sensitive materials, the original recordings, the code book for deciphering them, and his personal journal explaining the bridge's activities. I believe he meant for you to find them someday. Why would he think I'd ever live in this house? The letter to me that you found, the one from your grandmother, she knew. Margaret was part of it too, though not officially. She helped establish contacts through her work at the State Department. They discussed many times what should happen to the records. Robert believed they should be preserved but protected until they could be properly contextualized. Your grandmother suggested the house might someday return to family hands. A nurse appears in the doorway announcing that visiting hours are ending. Emily has only moments left with Mrs. Walsh. Who can I trust? She asks urgently. Trust your instincts. And remember, your grandfather wasn't a traitor. He was a patriot who understood that sometimes loving your country means saving it from its own worst impulses. Mrs. Walsh presses something into Emily's hand, a small key. For the filing cabinet in the hidden room. The bottom drawer has a false back. Behind it is additional documentation about the bridge, names, contacts, protocols. Be careful who sees it. As Emily drives back to the house, her mind spins with revelations and questions. The story misses. Walsh told aligns with Jack's account of his grandfather receiving unauthorized communications, but contradicts everything she thought she knew about her own grandfather. Robert Taylor, our high school teacher, devoted husband, quiet intellectual, had been a spy. No more than a spy. A man who'd operated outside official channels during a nuclear crisis, communicating directly with Soviet counterparts against explicit policy. Actions that some would consider heroic, others treasonous. And now, 60 years later, those actions have placed Emily and her children in the crosshairs of competing interests. Government agencies, possibly foreign entities, and individuals with personal stakes in how this hidden history is revealed or suppressed. She pulls into her driveway, noticing with unease that Jack's truck is the only vehicle present. No FBI sedan watching from down the street, no mysterious deliveries. The temporary calm feels more ominous than reassuring. Inside, she finds Jack and the children in the kitchen preparing dinner together. The domestic scene is so normal, so at odds with the international intrigue she's been thrust into, that Emily almost laughs. "Mrs. Walsh," Jack asks quietly as the kids set the table. "Recovering and full of revelations." Emily keeps her voice low. "We need to talk after the kids are asleep." Dinner passes with forced normalcy. Ethan chattering about the progress they've made on drying out the basement. Lily showing uncharacteristic engagement as she describes the architectural features she's discovered beneath layers of renovation. When the children finally retire to their rooms, Emily and Jack sit at the kitchen table, mugs of coffee between them like a buffer against the weight of history they're about to discuss. "Mrs. Walsh told me about something called the Bridge," Emily begins. "A network of American and Soviet officers communicating directly during the Cuban Missile Crisis outside official channels." Jack nods slowly. "My grandfather's log mentioned something similar. Communications that didn't come through Sinclair, but directly to ship commanders. I always wondered how that was possible." According to Mrs. Walsh, my grandfather and others established direct contact with Soviet counterparts who shared their concern about nuclear escalation. They exchanged information that helped prevent miscalculations on both sides. That would have been considered treason during the Cold War. Jack says, not accusingly but matter-of-factly. Unauthorized communication with the enemy, sharing of intelligence assessments, or the highest form of patriotism depending on your perspective. If their actions help prevent nuclear war, the FBI clearly has a perspective, and they're not the only ones interested. Jack's expression is grave. "While you were gone, a man came by. Russian accent, impeccable English. Said he was a historian researching Cold War communications technology. Asked very specific questions about the house, about your grandfather." Emily feels a chill. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing helpful, but his interest seemed more than academic. He left his card." Jack produces a business card with Cyrillic text alongside English, "Dr. Mikhail Baranov Institute for Historical Research, Moscow." Russian intelligence. Possibly, or exactly what he claims to be, a historian interested in Cold War secrets. Either way, it confirms Mrs. Walsh's suggestion that there's interest from the Russian side as well. Emily shares what Mrs. Walsh told her about the safe, the key, and the false back in the filing cabinet. Together, they descend to the basement, now mostly dried out, but still bearing evidence of the flooding. The workbench stands against the far wall, its pegboard backing covered with ancient tools. Emily examines it carefully, finding that the entire pegboard is mounted on hinges, concealing a wall safe behind it. She enters her grandmother's birth date, 03/17/1925, and the safe clicks open. Inside is a small, fireproof box which Emily removes with trembling hands. The box contains exactly what Mrs. Walsh described: a small reel-to-reel tape player with several magnetic tapes, a leather-bound journal, and a thin booklet that appears to be a cipher key. "This is it," Emily whispers, "the evidence of the bridge." They carry the box to the kitchen table where Emily carefully opens the journal. Her grandfather's familiar handwriting fills the pages. Meticulous, precise, the penmanship of a man who valued clarity above all else. The opening entry is dated October 14th, 1962, the day U.S. reconnaissance discovered Soviet missiles in Cuba. Confirmation of Jupiter installations has created expected reaction. Mandate received to increase SIGINT coverage of all Soviet communications. Unofficial channels report heightened alert status in Soviet strategic forces. K continues to miscalculate American resolve, while American leadership underestimates Soviet commitment. Classic escalatory spiral forming. B protocol initiated. "B protocol," Jack murmurs. "The bridge." Emily nods, turning pages. The entries become more detailed and alarming as the crisis deepens. On October 22nd, the day of Kennedy's televised address announcing the discovery of missiles, and implementing a naval quarantine of Cuba, her grandfather wrote, official channels now completely rigid. Jade reports Soviet submarine deployments exceeding expected patterns. Marigold confirms heightened alert at missile sites. Bridge activation authorized by council vote. First contact established via lighthouse. Authentication protocols completed successfully. Initial exchange confirms mutual concern, recommand volatility on both sides. Lighthouse Jade Marigold, Jack notes. Code names for contacts. It seems like it. Lighthouse was mentioned in relation to your grandfather's submarine. The most detailed entry comes on October 27th, what historians later called Black Saturday, the day when the crisis reached its peak with the shooting down of an American U-2 spy plane over Cuba and the confrontation with Soviet submarines near the blockade line. Multiple flashpoints developing simultaneously. Cuban SAM operators acted without Moscow's authorization in downing U-2. Khrushchev's control over military elements appears compromised. Lighthouse reports Soviet submarine B-59 surrounded by American destroyers losing contact with Moscow captain, considering nuclear response. Emergency activation of Ruby Channel. Direct communication authorized with Nephrite Group. Message transmitted. Flashpoint protocols. Active confirmation of non-nuclear status of depth charges. Kennedy unaware of submarine confrontation, diplomatic resolution still viable. Lighthouse will attempt direct relay to B-59 command. Nephrite must be the Soviet officer group, Emily says, her voice hushed with the weight of history. They were warning the submarine directly. Jack's expression is a mix of awe and disbelief. This rewrites everything we know about that confrontation. History records that Vasily Arkhipov, the Soviet officer aboard B-59, refused to authorize the nuclear torpedo launch against the judgment of the captain and political officer. But there's never been a clear explanation of why he held firm when the others were convinced nuclear war had already begun. Now we know. Emily turns to the final entry from the crisis period dated October 28th, when Khrushchev announced the withdrawal of Soviet missiles from Cuba. Crisis officially resolved. Bridge operations suspended but network maintained. Magpie Lighthouse Cardinal Amber. All confirmed stand-down of alert forces. Harvest Moon Station returning to standard SIGINT operations per NSA directive. Bridge materials secured via Protocol Omega. Council votes unanimously to maintain capability for future crises. History will record diplomatic channels as sole mechanism of resolution. The truth is more complex, more human. Someday it should be told. They sit in silence for several moments, absorbing the implications of what they have read. Emily's grandfather and his colleagues had established unauthorized communications with Soviet counterparts during history's most dangerous nuclear standoff. They had exchanged information warnings, perhaps even coordinated responses outside the knowledge or authorization of their respective governments. We need to hear the recordings, Jack says finally. Your grandfather preserved them for a reason. Emily examines the tape player, a specialized military model designed for secure communications. It requires power, but the house's electrical system is hardly reliable after the flooding. We could take it to Coleman, she suggests. He seems to understand what's at stake here. Or we could try to power it ourselves. I have a power inverter in my truck, could run it off a car battery if necessary. As they debate their next steps, Emily's phone rings. An unknown number. She answers cautiously. Ms. Harrison, the voice is Agent Donovan's. I thought you should know that Eleanor Walsh passed away an hour ago. Complications from her fall, apparently. My condolences. Emily feels the blood drain from her face. That's not possible. I just spoke with her. She was recovering. Nevertheless, she's gone. I'm sure this comes as a shock. In light of this development, I strongly encourage you to reconsider our conversation about certain materials that might be in your possession. Mrs. Walsh can no longer advise you, but I assure you surrendering any classified materials to the Bureau is the wisest course of action. The call ends, leaving Emily staring at her phone in disbelief. What happened? Jack asks, alarmed by her expression. Mrs. Walsh is dead. Complications from her fall, supposedly. Emily's voice shakes with emotion and suspicion. She was fine when I left her. Alert, engaged. This can't be coincidence. You think someone... I don't know what to think anymore, but the timing is too convenient. She tells me about the bridge, about competing interests in these recordings, and hours later she's dead. Jack's expression hardens. We need to listen to those tapes now. And then we need to get you and the kids somewhere safe until we figure out who can be trusted. They connect the tape player to Jack's power inverter, selecting the tape labeled October 27, 1962, Flashpoint. The ancient machine hums to life, reels beginning to turn. Static fills the kitchen, then resolves into voices. First in Russian, then an American voice Emily recognizes from photographs and home movies as her grandfather's. Lighthouse Harvest Moon confirms receipt. Authentication confirmed. Be advised, Flashpoint protocols now active. Repeat, Flashpoint protocols active. Blackbird sends personal message. Tell Vasya Eleanor still has his book of Pushkin. She reads it when the snow falls. End message. More Russian follows, then her grandfather again. Confirmed submarine B-59 surrounded by USS Beale and supporting vessels. Depth charges are practice rounds only. Repeat, non-nuclear ordnance. Kennedy has not authorized nuclear deployment. Diplomatic channels still open. Moscow still in communication with Washington. Nuclear war has not begun. Acknowledge. A pause, then a heavily accented voice responds in English. Harvest Moon Lighthouse acknowledges. Will relay to B-59 command if possible. Conditions difficult. Submarine has lost contact with Moscow, believes war may have started. Captain Savitsky insistent on defensive measures. Relay to Vasya directly if necessary. Remind him of Leningrad 1956. The promise we made. Will attempt, for the children Robert. For all children Nikolai. The tape continues with additional exchanges, technical details about submarine positions, the status of diplomatic communications, assessments of leadership stability on both sides. What emerges is a remarkable picture: American and Soviet officers working together, sharing critical information outside official channels, unified by their determination to prevent catastrophe, regardless of political considerations. As the tape ends, Emily and Jack sit in stunned silence. The full weight of what they've discovered settles over them. Evidence that could rewrite Cold War history, challenge official narratives, and implicate respected figures on both sides in what some would consider treasonous activities. Now we know why everyone wants these recordings, Jack says finally. The FBI to bury them, historians to reveal them, foreign interests to exploit them. And Mrs. Walsh dies hours after telling me about them. Emily's voice hardens with resolve. My grandfather preserved this history for a reason. I won't let it be buried again, or used to harm those who acted to prevent nuclear war. A noise from upstairs interrupts their conversation, a creak of floorboards too deliberate to be settling house noises. Emily and Jack exchange alarmed glances. Someone else is in the house. Jack moves silently to the kitchen doorway, peering into the darkened hallway beyond. Emily checks her phone. No service again. The convenient timing raises her suspicions further. The kids, she mouths silently to Jack, pointing upstairs. He nods, reaching slowly into his tool belt and extracting a heavy wrench, an improvised weapon. Emily grabs a knife from the counter, her heart pounding. Another creak closer now. A shadow moves in the hallway, tall male advancing deliberately toward the kitchen. Jack tenses, preparing to confront the intruder. Emily positions herself behind him, knife ready, every maternal instinct screaming to protect her children, sleeping upstairs. The figure reaches the kitchen doorway, silhouetted against the dim light from the living room beyond. In the moment before Jack strikes, the intruder speaks. Ms. Harrison, I believe we need to talk. The voice belongs to Colonel Coleman. Jack lowers the wrench slightly but doesn't relax his defensive posture. How did you get in? The back door was unlocked, careless given the circumstances. Coleman steps into the light, his gaze falling immediately on the tape player and open journal on the table. I see you found it. Robert's insurance policy. Mrs. Walsh is dead, Emily says bluntly. Died suddenly after telling me about the bridge. Coleman's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. Genuine surprise or well-disguised knowledge. That's unfortunate timing. Eleanor was the last living American member of the original bridge network. Except you, Jack challenges. You knew about all of this. I was never part of the bridge itself, too junior then. I worked with Robert later in the 70s when the network was maintained as a back channel during other crises. Vietnam, the 73 Arab-Israeli War, Afghanistan. Coleman moves toward the table, examining the materials. Eleanor contacted me when she learned you'd bought the house. asked me to provide guidance if necessary. And now she's conveniently dead after telling me everything. Emily doesn't bother hiding her suspicion. Hours after the FBI visits asking about these exact recordings. The FBI has its own agenda, Coleman acknowledges, as do other interested parties, which is why we need to secure these materials immediately. They're not safe here. And they're safe with you, Jack asks skeptically. Safer than in a house being watched by multiple intelligence agencies, yes. Coleman's tone is matter of fact. Ms. Harrison, I understand your suspicion, but Robert Taylor was my mentor, my friend. I share his belief that this history should eventually be told, but carefully with proper context, not exploited for contemporary political advantage. Emily studies Coleman's face, looking for deception. How do I know I can trust you? You don't, but consider the alternatives. The FBI will classify these materials indefinitely. Foreign interests will use them selectively to discredit American institutions. Private researchers might sensationalize without understanding the full context. And what would you do with them? Preserve them. Document them properly with help from historians who understand the era. Eventually release them through appropriate academic channels with proper context and protection for those still living who might be affected. It's a reasonable approach aligned with what Emily believes her grandfather would have wanted. But Mrs. Walsh's sudden death and the competing claims on this historical material leave her hesitant to trust anyone fully. Before she can respond, headlights sweep across the kitchen window, a vehicle pulling into her driveway. Through the glass, Emily sees the now familiar black sedan of the FBI agents. Donovan, she whispers. They're moving faster than I expected, Coleman says grimly. We need to leave. Now, bring the materials. My children are asleep upstairs, Emily protests. Wake them. Quietly. We have perhaps 2 minutes before they're at the door. Jack moves toward the stairs, while Emily quickly gathers the tapes, journal, and Cipher book, returning them to their fireproof box. Coleman watches the driveway, his posture tense. 3 agents, he reports. Standard field team. They'll have a warrant this time. Emily feels panic rising. Where can we go? They'll just follow us. I have a safe house outside town. Off-grid secure. We can regroup there, decide next steps. Coleman glances at the box in Emily's hands. Is that everything? Everything from the safe. There's more in the hidden room in the attic. The most critical materials are what you're holding. The rest can wait. Jack returns with Lily and Ethan, both disheveled from sleep and confused by the urgent awakening. Emily quickly explains they need to leave for the night, a special sleepover at a friend's cabin, without mentioning the FBI agents now approaching their front door. Out the back, Coleman directs. My car is parked a block away. Stay close to the tree line, avoid street lights. They slip out the back door just as a firm knock sounds at the front of the house. Moving quickly through the darkness, Emily clutches Ethan's hand while Jack guides Lily along the edge of the property where shadows provide cover. Coleman leads them to a nondescript SUV parked on a side street. Get in, quickly. As they pull away, Emily sees the FBI agents at her front door in the rearview mirror. One speaks into a radio. They've discovered the house empty. They'll set up roadblocks, Coleman says, accelerating smoothly, but not before we're clear of town. Where exactly are we going? Jack asks, his tone suggesting he's not entirely comfortable with this rapid escape. A property I maintain for contingencies. Remote defensible off official records. We can secure the materials there while determining next steps. Emily holds the fireproof box on her lap, acutely aware that she's now fleeing federal agents while in possession of classified national security materials. The legal implications are alarming, but the historical and moral stakes feel even higher. Colonel, she asks as they leave the town limits behind, what exactly happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis? The real story beyond what's in the history books. Coleman is silent for a long moment, his eyes on the dark road ahead. The official narrative credits diplomatic channels, careful management by Kennedy and Khrushchev. That's partially true, but it omits the near launches, the miscommunications, the military commanders on both sides who exceeded their authority or misinterpreted orders. And the bridge, a network of officers who recognized the madness unfolding and took extraordinary measures to prevent it. They established direct communications circumventing paralyzed official channels. They shared critical intelligence about each side's activities and intentions. They humanized the enemy when political rhetoric reduced the other side to caricatures. Treason by strict definition, Jack observes from the back seat. Yes, Coleman acknowledges, and the highest form of patriotism by another standard. They saved millions of lives, perhaps civilization itself. The most consequential moment came on October 27th when Soviet submarine B-59 was cornered by American destroyers. The submarine with Vasily Arkhipov, Emily says, recalling the history. The Soviet officer who refused to authorize a nuclear torpedo launch. Exactly. B-59 had lost contact with Moscow, was being bombarded with practice depth charges, and believed nuclear war might already have begun. The captain and political officer wanted to launch their nuclear torpedo. Standard Soviet protocol went out of communication and under attack. Arkhipov alone refused. Because of the message from Harvest Moon, Jack concludes, from the bridge. A direct communication relayed through Soviet intelligence contacts confirming that nuclear war had not begun, that diplomatic channels remained open, that the depth charges were conventional, not nuclear. Information Arkhipov couldn't have had through official channels. Information that gave him the confidence to stand firm against the pressure to launch. Emily contemplates the enormity of this revelation. One man with information provided by an unauthorized network operating outside official channels prevented what could have escalated to full nuclear exchange. And that's precisely why these recordings remain sensitive 60 years later, Coleman confirms. They challenge the mythology of how the crisis was resolved. They implicate respected figures in potentially treasonous activities. And they demonstrate that sometimes military officers acting outside the chain of command saved humanity from the consequences of political brinksmanship. As they drive deeper into the countryside, Emily watches her sleeping children in the back seat. Ethan's head rests against Jack's shoulder, while Lily leans against the window, headphones in place even in sleep. Her shield against a world that's become increasingly uncertain. Emily thinks of her grandfather, the quiet, principled man she thought she knew, now revealed as someone who made the extraordinary choice to risk everything for what he believed was right. Who preserved evidence of that choice, perhaps knowing that someday his granddaughter would face her own decision about how this hidden history should be revealed or protected. The SUV turns onto a narrow dirt road, headlights illuminating dense forest on both sides. They've left civilization behind, traveling into darkness that feels both threatening and protective. Almost there, Coleman announces, reducing speed as the road grows rougher. Emily clutches the box containing her grandfather's legacy, aware that she's crossed a threshold. There's no going back to the simple renovation project she'd planned, the fresh start she'd hoped for. Instead, she's become the custodian of secrets that could rewrite history, secrets that powerful interests would prefer remain buried. The car crests a small rise, revealing a cabin nestled in a clearing ahead. It's rustic but substantial, with a generator humming quietly beside it. Solar panels are visible on the roof, modern additions to what appears to be a decades-old structure. "Welcome to Echo Site," Coleman says, parking beside the cabin. One of the original safe houses established for bridge operations. Off the grid, defensible, and equipped with everything we need to evaluate those recordings properly. As they exit the vehicle, Emily notices surveillance cameras discreetly positioned around the perimeter. Modern security protecting a Cold War legacy. The juxtaposition feels appropriate for their situation, bridging past and present, just as her grandfather had bridged ideological divides during humanity's most dangerous hour. Inside the cabin is surprisingly well appointed. Behind its rustic exterior lies sophisticated communications equipment, a small armory of weapons, and what appears to be a complete signals intelligence workstation. Modern equipment alongside preserved Cold War-era technology. "You have maintained this place all these years," Jack asks, examining the facility with professional interest. "The bridge network never fully disbanded," Coleman explains, securing the door behind them. "It evolved, adapted to changing threats. Different personnel, same principle. Unofficial channels when official ones might fail. It's still active." Emily is stunned by the implication. Not in its original form, but the idea persists that sometimes direct human connection across political and ideological divides is the last defense against catastrophic miscalculation. Coleman gestures to a secure safe built into the wall. "We should store the materials there until morning. Then we can properly review them and decide our next steps." Emily hesitates, reluctant to relinquish her grandfather's legacy. What happens then? That depends partly on you. These recordings belong to history, but how and when they were revealed matters greatly. Coleman's expression is solemn. Robert believed the truth should eventually be told. I share that belief. But timing and context are crucial. As Emily contemplates this responsibility, a notification chimes on Coleman's secure communications system. He checks it, his expression darkening. The FBI has issued a federal warrant for your arrest, Ms. Harrison. Charges include possession of classified materials, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit espionage. Espionage, Emily is incredulous. That's absurd. It's leverage, Coleman explains grimly. They're escalating to force your compliance. Standard bureau tactics when they want something badly enough. They can't seriously believe I'm a spy. Of course not. But the charges give them broad authority to seize property, detain individuals, and bypass normal due process. Coleman studies a satellite image forming on a screen. They've established roadblocks on all major arteries leaving town. State police have been mobilized to assist. Jack moves to Emily's side protectively. This is excessive for 60-year-old recordings. Unless there's something on those recordings beyond what we've heard, Coleman suggests, something that remains sensitive even now. Emily recalls her grandfather's journal entries, the code names, the references to Protocol Omega for securing bridge materials. What else could be on these tapes? That's what we need to find out. Coleman turns to a sophisticated audio workstation. With your permission, I'd like to analyze the remaining recordings using modern enhancement techniques. There may be layers we haven't detected yet. The severity of the situation leaves Emily little choice. She nods her agreement, watching as Coleman carefully loads one of the tapes into a digital conversion system. As technology from two different eras interfaces, Cold War recordings analyzed by modern digital systems, Emily settles her exhausted children in a small bedroom. Lily remains sullen and suspicious, while Ethan views the entire experience as an unexpected adventure. Mom, are we in trouble? Lily asks when they're alone. Those men at the house were FBI, weren't they? Emily considers how much truth her daughter can handle. It's complicated, honey. Great-grandpa Robert left behind some important historical materials in our house. Different people have different ideas about what should happen to them. Like Mrs. Walsh's drawings, the codes. Exactly like that. It turns out those drawings might be more significant than we realized. Lily's expression shifts from suspicion to interest. She was teaching me how to read them. Said they were a special kind of map that showed how information moved around town during the Cold War. This confirms what Emily has begun to suspect, that Eleanor Walsh had been preparing Lily, intentionally sharing knowledge about the bridge network's methodology. But why? What had the elderly woman seen in Emily's daughter that prompted this transfer of knowledge? What else did she teach you about the drawings? Emily asked carefully. Lily retrieves her sketchbook from her backpack. She showed me how certain symbols represent different types of communication points. See these triangles? They mark listening posts where they could intercept radio signals. The circles are relay points where messages could be passed physically. And these dashed lines show secure paths between locations. Emily examines the detailed renderings, recognizing for the first time that her daughter has been documenting not just artistic drawings, but a comprehensive map of a covert intelligence network. The implications are simultaneously alarming and fascinating. And this symbol here, Emily points to a distinctive mark near their house. That's a bridge point, where different networks connect. Mrs. Walsh said those were the most important locations of all. The pieces align in Emily's mind. Eleanor Walsh hadn't just been sharing interesting historical drawings. She'd been deliberately passing operational knowledge to the next generation, preserving the methodology of the bridge network through Emily's artistically gifted daughter. When Emily returns to the main room, she finds Jack and Coleman hunched over the audio equipment, expressions grave. You need to hear this, Coleman says, adjusting controls on the enhanced recording system. We found something embedded in the carrier wave of the original recording, a secondary audio track audible only when the signal is split and processed through specific frequency filters. He activates the system and a new voice emerges from the speakers, Russian speaking, clearly in accented English. Harvest Moon, this is Cardinal. Authentication sequence follows Sierra Echo, Victor Echo, so. November, message received and understood. Protocol Sunrise initiated as discussed. Assets in place at Jupiter sites. awaiting final confirmation for parallel de-escalation. Kennedy remains unaware of Mongoose modifications. Khrushchev similarly isolated from Sovnarkom Hawks. Bridge Council recommendation accepted by both asset networks. Will proceed as planned. The recording continues with additional exchanges, technical details, confirmation codes, references to assets and positions. What emerges is a picture far more complex than even the bridge network Emily had already discovered. What is this? She asked, struggling to process the implications. What's protocol? Sunrise Jupiter cites Mongoose modifications. Coleman's expression is grave. A level of the bridge operation not documented in official histories or even in most classified records. It appears certain officers on both sides didn't just communicate during the crisis. They actively coordinated parallel de-escalation measures without authorization from their respective command structures. Meaning what exactly, Jack asks. Meaning Soviet and American officers may have taken concrete actions to prevent escalation, actions their political leaders never authorized. The Jupiter sites were American missile installations in Turkey that Kennedy eventually agreed to remove as part of the resolution. Mongoose was the CIA operation against Cuba. Are you saying American and Soviet officers were independently negotiating the terms of resolution outside official diplomatic channels? Emily can hardly believe the implication. Not just negotiating, Coleman clarifies, implementing. Assets in place suggests operatives positioned to ensure certain military capabilities were quietly neutralized if the crisis escalated further. A fail-safe against political miscalculation. Jack whistles softly. That goes beyond unauthorized communication. That's active interference with military command and control. Precisely why these recordings remain so sensitive 60 years later, Coleman confirms. They suggest the resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis, often portrayed as Kennedy's finest hour and a triumph of diplomacy, was significantly influenced by military officers acting without authorization, coordinating directly with their Soviet counterparts. This would rewrite Cold War history, Emily realizes, challenge fundamental narratives about how the crisis was resolved, and implicate respected military figures on both sides in what could be construed as mutiny or worse. Coleman's expression is somber. Now you understand why multiple agencies are so determined to secure these recordings, and why your grandfather kept them hidden rather than destroyed. He believes someday the full truth should be known, but only when it could be properly contextualized. Emily contemplates the weight of this revelation. Her grandfather and his colleagues hadn't just established unofficial communications during the crisis. They had apparently created parallel structures to circumvent official chains of command, if necessary, coordinating with Soviet counterparts to prevent nuclear war, regardless of political decisions. Actions that saved humanity from potential annihilation, but that violated fundamental military principles of civilian control and chain of command. Heroism or treason. The distinction blurs when the stakes involve millions of lives. What do we do now? Emily asked, the responsibility of her grandfather's legacy feeling heavier than ever. That, Coleman says gravely, is the question we must answer by morning. Because I assure you the FBI will not stop searching until they find you and these recordings. As if confirming his assessment, a secure communication system chimes with an incoming alert. Coleman checks it, his expression hardening. Federal agencies have expanded their search perimeter. They're deploying aerial surveillance assets, and they've issued a bolo for my vehicle. He turns to Emily, his manner shifting from academic to tactical. We have perhaps 6 hours before they locate this facility. We need to decide destroy the evidence, surrender it, or find a way to protect it while ensuring the truth eventually emerges. The countdown has begun. By dawn, Emily must determine the fate of her grandfather's legacy, a hidden history that could transform our understanding of how humanity navigated its closest brush with nuclear annihilation. 6 hours isn't much time to rewrite history. Or preserve it. The question remains, what would your grandfather want? He kept these recordings for a reason. He could have destroyed them decades ago. Robert always believed the truth would eventually surface. That's why he mapped the network on the walls where only someone with the right perspective would recognize it. Mrs. Walsh said something similar, that some secrets protect people, but that doesn't mean they should remain buried forever. The bridge network operated on a fundamental principle. that human connection transcends political divisions, that individuals working together can prevent catastrophe when systems fail. Then we need to honor that principle, not surrender these materials to be buried in government archives, but not simply release them without context either. What are you suggesting? A bridge of our own between past and present. We need to ensure these recordings reach the right people: historians, peace scholars, ethicists who can properly contextualize what happened. The FBI won't simply allow that, and we have maybe 5 hours now before they find us. Then we need allies. People who share my grandfather's vision that this history should be preserved but protected. I might know someone who can help: a former colleague at Georgetown, professor of Cold War history with appropriate security clearances and international credibility. Can they be trusted? As much as anyone can be in this situation, he's dedicated his career to understanding how humanity survived the nuclear age. Make the call, but first we need to secure the children. They can't be involved in whatever happens next. My sister lives an hour north of here. The kids would be safe with her until this is resolved. I hate involving more people, but Lily and Ethan need to be somewhere secure. Jack, would you take them? I trust you with my children's safety more than anyone right now. You should go with them, Emily. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment I found those recordings in my house. My grandfather preserved this history for a reason. I need to see this through. You understand the risk: federal charges, potential imprisonment, for protecting historical truth. Yes, I understand, but some principles are worth the risk. I'll prepare transport for the children. Backroads only, avoiding surveillance. Emily, you should record what you've learned. Insurance in case things go wrong. Good idea. If something happens to us, there should be a record of what these materials contain and why they matter. Use this: secure digital recorder, military-grade encryption. Even if intercepted, it can't be accessed without the proper authentication. I'll start immediately. Jack helped the kids pack essentials. Nothing electronic that could be tracked. We're really running from the FBI. Isn't that like super illegal? We're protecting historical truth, Lily. Sometimes that means challenging official narratives. Like Mrs. Walsh's drawings, the codes and network maps. Exactly like that. Your great-grandfather was part of something extraordinary. A network of people who worked across enemy lines to prevent nuclear war. We're making sure that story isn't buried. Is that why those men were at our house? Why Mrs. Walsh died? We don't know for certain what happened to Mrs. Walsh, but yes, different people want these recordings for different reasons. She told me the drawings were important, that someday I might need to remember how they worked. What exactly did she tell you about them? That they weren't just drawings, they were a system, a way for people to communicate when normal channels failed. She called it the architecture of peace, built into the walls so it would endure even if the people who created it were gone. And she was teaching you how to read this architecture? She said I had the right kind of eyes, that artists see patterns others miss. Your great-grandfather would be proud. He was protecting humanity's future, your future, even if it meant breaking rules, just as we're doing now. Colonel, your secure line is active. The professor is waiting. Professor Abernathy, thank you for taking my call. The situation is sensitive and time-critical. James, it's been some time. Your message said this concerns bridge network materials from October '62, recently discovered in a private residence. Original recordings, operational journals, and network maps. Evidence of higher-level bridge operations than previously documented. My God, the theoretical Sunrise Protocol, you've found confirmation. More than confirmation, explicit documentation of coordinated de-escalation measures implemented outside official channels. American and Soviet officers working in parallel to neutralize risk points. This would fundamentally alter our understanding of how the crisis was resolved. Precisely why I'm calling. Federal agencies are attempting to secure these materials, presumably to maintain existing narratives. We need a trusted third party to ensure proper historical preservation and contextual analysis. The Woodrow Wilson Center could provide the necessary framework. We have established protocols for handling sensitive historical materials with appropriate security measures. The immediate concern is ensuring these materials reach you. We're currently facing federal pursuit. I can activate certain channels. Academic colleagues with diplomatic standing. Where are you now? That information should be shared through more secure means. Suffice to say we have perhaps 4 hours before our location is compromised. I understand. I'll make immediate arrangements. Expect contact within the hour with extraction protocols. And James, thank you. The historical significance of these materials cannot be overstated. Not just historical, Richard. The precedent matters for future crises as well. The bridge principle, that human connection can transcend political division when humanity's survival is at stake. All the more reason to preserve this legacy properly. Stand by for further communication. The professor will help. Now we need to prepare for your departure, Jack. Take the Northern Forest Road. It connects to Highway 16 after about 12 miles. Minimal surveillance coverage in that sector. What about the roadblocks? They'll be checking in all vehicles leaving the area. My sister's husband is county sheriff. I've already texted him. He'll ensure that particular road remains unchecked for the next few hours. You're sure he can be trusted? With the safety of children, absolutely. The full context of the situation that's need to know. He simply understands that his niece and nephew require safe passage. Mom, I don't want to go without you. I know, honey, but this is the safest plan. Jack will take good care of you, and I'll join you as soon as I can. Promise. I promise. Now, help your brother finish packing, okay? Just essentials. What happens after the kids are safely away? We still have the FBI closing in, and now they'll have federal warrants for all of us. Professor Abernathy is activating his network, academic colleagues with diplomatic standing who can ensure these materials receive proper historical treatment rather than disappearing into classified archives. And if the FBI arrives before these academics, then we make certain the truth survives even if the original materials are seized. Emily's recording a comprehensive account of what we've discovered. We'll distribute secure copies through multiple channels. The bridge principle in action, ensuring critical information survives even if primary sources are compromised. Exactly, Robert would approve of the symmetry. Mom, we're ready. Ethan packed his dinosaur and I've got my sketchbook. Perfect. Remember, this is just for a short time, like an adventure. Jack will keep you safe until I can join you. What if those men find you the ones in the dark suits? Then I'll deal with that situation when it comes. But I've got Colonel Coleman to help me, and we're doing the right thing, preserving important history. Mrs. Walsh said history doesn't just happen in big moments. It happens when ordinary people make hard choices. She was very wise, and right now we're all making choices that matter. Jack, there's a secure sat phone in the glove compartment. Check in when you reach Sarah's place, but then maintain communication blackout until you receive the all-clear code. Understood. And the code? Harvest Moon rises. Anything else should be treated as potentially compromised. Emily, we should go now. The forest road is most secure before dawn. I know. Kids, come here. One more hug before you go. Be careful, Mom. Always, I love you both so much. Now go with Jack. I'll see you soon. They'll be safe with Jack. He's proven himself trustworthy. I hope so. Trusting anyone feels dangerous right now. Yet trust is exactly what the bridge network was built on. Individuals reaching across divisions when systems failed. Speaking of trust, this professor you've contacted, what's his interest in the bridge materials? Richard Abernathy has spent his career studying how humanity survived the nuclear age. He's documented other instances of what he calls unofficial diplomacy, cases where individual actors circumvented formal channels to prevent escalation. And he has the necessary clearances to handle classified material. Former State Department security clearances maintained through his academic work. More importantly, he has international credibility, respected by scholars on both sides of the former Iron Curtain. The perfect person to contextualize what my grandfather and the others did. Robert would have approved. He always said the truth should eventually be told, but with proper context and understanding. Colonel, we have movement on the perimeter. Vehicle approaching from the South Access Road. Too soon for Abernathy's people, and Jack's barely had time to clear the area with the children. FBI, possibly, or another interested party. The Russians, perhaps. The man who visited your house, Dr. Baranov, would have resources to track us. What do? We need more information. Let me check the surveillance feed. Black SUV government plates, 2 occupants visible. Federal agents then, but not a standard tactical team. They'd send more personnel for a raid. Could it be Donovan, the FBI agent from my house? Possibly. Let me enhance the image. It's him and one other agent, just the 2 of them. Unusual protocol for apprehending suspected espionage. They should have a full tactical team if they're executing a federal warrant, unless they're operating outside standard bureau procedures, off the books. That would align with the sensitivity of these materials. Donovan may be trying to secure them without creating an official record, which gives us leverage. If he's here unofficially, he's vulnerable. What are you suggesting? That we negotiate from a position of strength. You want to confront a federal agent while in possession of classified materials? That's extremely high risk. The alternative is waiting for a full tactical team to arrive. At least with Donovan, we might have room to maneuver. You're more like your grandfather than you realize. He made similar calculated risks during the crisis. Then let's prepare. What's our approach? Direct but controlled. We acknowledge the existence of the materials, but emphasize their historical significance. We make clear that the secure copies already exist in multiple locations. Insurance against seizure or destruction. Exactly, and we appeal to what may well be Donovan's personal interest in these recordings. Why he's here with minimal personnel, rather than executing a standard bureau operation. You think he has a personal stake in this history? Everyone connected to this case seems to. Your grandfather, Jack's grandfather, Eleanor Walsh. Even my own involvement stems from personal connection to Robert. These recordings touch on fundamental questions of duty, loyalty, and moral choice. Then let's find out what brings Agent Donovan to our door at dawn without backup or a tactical team. They're approaching the cabin, 2 minutes at most. Let them approach. No need to reveal our surveillance capabilities. Agent Donovan, this is an unexpected visit. Ms. Harrison, Colonel Coleman, I believe you have materials that belong in federal custody. Historical materials that require proper contextual preservation. Yes, though I'm curious why you're here without a tactical team, given the federal warrants apparently issued for our arrest. This situation has complexities that might be better resolved without creating an extensive paper trail, meaning you're here unofficially, outside standard bureau protocols. Let's say I'm exploring alternative resolutions before escalating to full enforcement actions. Very considerate and unusual for a federal agent executing espionage charges. The charges were leverage, as I suspect you've already deduced. What matters are the recordings and associated materials. Which raises the question, why do they matter so much to you personally, Agent Donovan? Enough to operate outside normal procedures. My interest is in ensuring national security matters are handled appropriately. A commendable professional stance, yet insufficient to explain your presence here alone at dawn. Perhaps we should focus on resolving the immediate situation. The materials in your possession are classified. Their retention by unauthorized persons constitutes a federal offense. Colonel, would you say the historical significance of these materials outweighs their current classification status? Without question, they document a critical moment in Cold War history, one that challenges conventional narratives, but provides essential insight into how humanity survived its closest brush with nuclear annihilation, which is precisely why we've arranged for their transfer to the Woodrow Wilson Center for proper historical preservation and contextual analysis, with appropriate security protocols, of course. That's not an acceptable resolution, Ms. Harrison. These materials must be remanded to federal custody. Agent Donovan, we both know this isn't standard procedure. You're here alone without a tactical team operating outside normal bureau protocols. That suggests personal interest beyond professional obligation. My father was a naval officer during the crisis, USS Pierce Destroyer Group. He was involved in the confrontation with Soviet submarine B-59, the submarine that nearly launched a nuclear torpedo. The official record credits Soviet officer Vasily Arkhipov with preventing the launch. What the record doesn't explain is why Arkhipov held firm when his fellow officers were convinced nuclear war had already begun. And you believe these recordings contain that explanation. I believe they contain evidence that my father was part of something extraordinary, something that saved millions of lives but violated chain of command, something that's been buried in classified archives for 60 years. The bridge network. My father spoke of it only once near the end of his life, said he'd received communications outside normal channels that helped prevent catastrophic escalation, said there were officers on both sides who recognized the madness unfolding and took action to prevent it. That aligns with what we've discovered. The recordings document direct communications between American and Soviet officers, a network operating outside official channels to prevent nuclear war when political systems were failing. Then you understand why I'm here. Not to bury this history, but to understand my father's role in it. A personal quest, not an official Bureau operation. The Bureau's interest is real, make no mistake. But my presence here, now in this manner, that's personal. And if we share what we've discovered about the bridge network, about your father's potential involvement, then perhaps we can find a resolution that serves both historical truth and national security interests. Colonel, your assessment. Agent Donovan's position appears genuine, and strategically cooperation offers advantages over confrontation given our respective leverages. Let's proceed then. We've discovered evidence of what appears to be called the Sunrise Protocol, coordinated de-escalation measures implemented by American and Soviet officers without explicit authorization from their respective chains of command. Sunrise Protocol. That wasn't in any of the materials my father referenced. It appears to have been compartmentalized even within the bridge network. Only those directly involved would have known the details. The USS Pierce was assigned to the destroyer group tracking B-59. If your father received communications from the bridge, he may well have been part of Sunrise without knowing its designation. The recordings reference assets in place at Jupiter sites and mongoose modifications, either suggesting active measures to neutralize potential escalation points on both sides. My father mentioned something similar, that certain officers had taken precautions in case political leadership made catastrophic decisions. I always assumed it was the rambling of an old man near death. Not rambling Agent Donovan. Evidence of perhaps the most extraordinary act of unauthorized cooperation in military history. Soviet and American officers working together to prevent nuclear war, regardless of political orders. I need to hear these recordings. Need to know if my father was part of this. And in exchange, I ensure the Bureau's investigation focuses on proper historical preservation rather than suppression. I have sufficient seniority to influence the approach. That's a significant commitment, Agent Donovan. One that could impact your career if these materials prove as sensitive as they appear. Some truths transcend career considerations, Colonel. If my father was part of saving humanity from nuclear annihilation, that legacy matters more than bureaucratic consequences. A perspective Robert Taylor would have appreciated. He believes some principles justify extraordinary actions, including circumventing chain of command when humanity's survival is at stake. Then we have the foundation for an agreement. I'll provide access to what we've discovered about the bridge network and Sunrise Protocol. You'll ensure these materials receive proper historical treatment rather than disappearing into classified archives. Agreed, though I should note, I'm only half of the Bureau's interest. My partner represents a different division with different priorities. Where is your partner now? Securing the perimeter, standard protocol even for unofficial operations. Colonel, your surveillance shows a second individual moving toward the rear of the cabin. Agent Donovan, I suggest you contact your partner immediately. This facility has certain security measures that could be triggered by unauthorized approach patterns. Richard, stand down. We're pursuing negotiated resolution. Sir, I have orders from Deputy Director Carson to secure the materials immediately regardless of local arrangements. Those orders are superseded by my authority as special agent in charge. Stand down, Richards. With respect, sir, the Deputy Director was explicit. These materials are to be secured and contained, not negotiated over. Your partner seems to have different priorities, Agent Donovan. Richards is Counterintelligence Division. They have institutional interest in suppressing anything that challenges official narratives about Soviet-American interactions during the Cold War. Then perhaps we should expedite our agreement before institutional interests overwhelm personal quest for truth. Agreed. Richard, stand down. That's a direct order. Sir, I cannot comply. The materials must be secured per counterintelligence protocols. We have a situation developing, Colonel. Any suggestions? This facility has secure rooms designed for exactly this contingency. We should relocate the materials immediately. Agent Donovan, I believe we share an interest in preserving historical truth. Will you assist us against what appears to be an attempt to suppress that truth? My oath is to the Constitution, not to bureaucratic interests in maintaining convenient narratives. Yes, I'll assist. Colonel, secure communication channel is activating. Professor Abernathy's extraction team must be in range. Perfect timing. Let's move to the secure room while I establish contact. Professor, we have a complicated situation. Federal agents on site with conflicting agendas regarding the materials. Understood, James. Our team is 5 minutes from your location. They have diplomatic credentials that should forestall direct federal intervention. Excellent. We'll secure the materials in the facility's protected room until your team arrives. Agent Richards is attempting to breach the rear entrance, Colonel. Non-lethal countermeasures activated. He'll be temporarily incapacitated but unharmed. You have countermeasures against federal agents. This facility was designed to protect sensitive historical materials against multiple threat vectors, including overzealous classification authorities. Robert Taylor was thorough in his contingency planning. My grandfather anticipated this scenario, federal agencies attempting to suppress historical truth. He understood the institutional imperative to maintain official narratives even at the expense of historical accuracy. The bridge network operated on the principle that sometimes systems fail and individuals must act outside those systems, which is exactly what we're doing now. The symmetry would not be lost on Robert, though I suspect even he didn't anticipate his granddaughter becoming the custodian of his most sensitive legacy. Agent Richards is no longer attempting to breach the entrance. Extraction team vehicles approaching from the north access road. Professor Abernathy has mobilized quickly. His academic network has significant resources when historical preservation is at stake. These academics can really protect the materials against federal agencies. The team includes representatives with diplomatic standing and connections to international historical preservation bodies. Federal agencies typically avoid direct confrontation with such entities. The diplomatic complications outweigh the benefits of immediate seizure. And you trust them with the full truth about the bridge network and Sunrise Protocol. I trust them to ensure proper historical treatment, contextual analysis that acknowledges both the extraordinary heroism and the legitimate questions about chain of command and civilian control of military forces, which is what my grandfather would have wanted. Precisely. Not uncritical celebration, not partisan exploitation, but thoughtful examination of how humanity navigated its closest brush with nuclear annihilation. Colonel Coleman extraction team has established perimeter security. Professor Abernathy requests direct communication. Put him through. James, we're in position. Our team includes representatives from the International Historical Commission with diplomatic credentials. We're prepared to secure the materials for transfer to appropriate preservation facilities. Excellent timing, Richard. We have federal agents on site with conflicting approaches to these materials. So I've been informed our diplomatic standing should provide temporary insulation from direct intervention. Is Ms. Harrison prepared for the materials transfer? Emily, the decision is ultimately yours. These recordings are your grandfather's legacy. Professor Abernathy, if I transfer these materials to your custody, what guarantees do I have regarding their proper historical treatment? The Commission employs rigorous protocols for sensitive historical materials. Multiple scholars with appropriate security clearances will analyze and contextualize the content. Publication will occur only after thorough review and with appropriate protections for individuals who might be affected. And the truth will eventually be told, the full story of what my grandfather and others did. That is our explicit commitment. Not sensationalism, not political exploitation, but scholarly examination of how humanity survived its most dangerous nuclear confrontation, including the more controversial aspects, the evidence that officers acted outside chain of command, especially those aspects, Ms. Harrison. They constitute the most significant historical revelation. That individual moral courage sometimes requires challenging institutional systems when humanity's survival is at stake. Then I consent to the transfer. These materials should be preserved and studied, not buried in classified archives or exploited for political advantage. A wise decision that honors your grandfather's legacy. Our team will begin secure transfer procedures immediately. Agent Donovan, will you oppose this transfer? No, Ms. Harrison. As we discussed, proper historical preservation serves both truth and ultimately national security interests. The Bureau's Counterintelligence Division may disagree, but I believe I can manage those institutional concerns. And your partner, Agent Richards, currently incapacitated by your facility's countermeasures, I believe, but he represents institutional interests that won't simply disappear with this transfer. Meaning this isn't over. The recordings may be secured for historical preservation, but questions about their possession and handling will persist. You should be prepared for ongoing legal challenges. Worth it to ensure the truth isn't buried for another 60 years. Your grandfather would be proud, Ms. Harrison. He made similar calculations during the crisis, weighing personal risk against higher principles. Professor, your team should expedite the transfer. Additional federal resources will likely be mobilized once headquarters realizes the local operation has been compromised. Understood. We're implementing accelerated protocols now, Zone. Harrison, if you'll accompany our team, we can complete the formal transfer documentation en route to secure facilities. What about Jack and my children? They're still potentially subject to federal pursuit. Our diplomatic standing extends to associated individuals. We'll establish contact and arrange secure transport to appropriate facilities until legal matters are resolved. And Colonel Coleman, I'll remain to manage the situation here. My existing security clearances provide certain protections against direct legal action. This feels like goodbye, Colonel. More like the continuation of a legacy, Ms. Harrison. Your grandfather entrusted these materials to future generations, believing someday the truth should be told. You've ensured that trust wasn't misplaced. I still don't understand. Why did he preserve these recordings when they could have implicated him in actions outside chain of command? Robert believed history deserved the complete truth, even when that truth is complicated or uncomfortable. That someday humanity would need to understand how we survived our closest brush with annihilation. He never told my mother, never told anyone in the family about his role. The bridge network operated under absolute secrecy. Even families were kept uninformed, both for operational security and to protect them from potential legal implications. Yet he preserved the evidence, mapped the network on the walls, kept the recordings hidden, but intact. For future generations, for moments when understanding how humanity navigated past crises might inform how we approach new ones. Colonel, there's something we found in the third recording, something I haven't mentioned yet. A personal message recorded after the operational communications. What kind of message? From my grandfather to whoever found the recordings. It was hidden in a separate frequency band, only detectable with specialized processing. What did it say? To whoever discovers these records, likely family given where they're hidden, you're now custodian of a complicated truth. During humanity's darkest hour, individuals on both sides recognized their common interest in survival and acted accordingly. Some would call this treason. I call it the highest duty, to humanity itself, transcending artificial divisions of nationality or ideology. Margaret and I agreed that someday when the world is ready, this truth should be told. Not to assign blame or credit, but to demonstrate that even at the height of division, human connection remained our salvation. The house contains everything needed to understand what happened during those 13 days in October 1962. Look to the walls where Eleanor preserved our methods in plain sight. Look to the floorboards where Arthur concealed our tools. And look to your conscience, which must ultimately guide decisions about this legacy. For my grandchildren, who I may never meet, know that everything we did for you, for your future, for the world you would inherit if we failed our duty to humanity. With love and hope, Robert Taylor, November 1962. A message across time, from one generation to the next. He knew someday his grandchildren might find these recordings, might face exactly the decision I'm making now. And you've honored his trust. ensured the truth will be preserved, contextualized, eventually shared with humanity. Ms. Hershey, we need to depart immediately. Federal aviation assets have been detected approaching the region. Colonel Coleman, thank you for helping me understand my grandfather's legacy and for ensuring it survives. The honor has been mine, Mr. Harrison. Your grandfather saved countless lives, including mine. Preserving his legacy is the least I could do in return. Harvest Moon rises. Remember to use that code when contacting Jack and the children. I will. And Emily, when the full story is eventually published, remember that complex truths require time to be properly understood. Your grandfather's actions will be debated, analyzed from multiple perspectives. That's as it should be. Some will call it treason. Others will recognize it as the highest form of patriotism. Just as he predicted, the truth is rarely simple, especially when it involves individuals acting outside systems during humanity's most dangerous moments. But the truth matters. Worth preserving, worth fighting for. Your grandfather would agree completely. Safe journey, Emily Harrison. You've ensured the bridge between past and future remains intact. 3 years later, Emily stands in a university auditorium watching as Professor Abernathy unveils the first public exhibition documenting the bridge network. Restored recordings, declassified documents, and interactive displays tell the story of how American and Soviet officers established unauthorized communications during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The controversy has been substantial as expected. Military historians question the propriety of actions outside chain of command. Political scientists debate implications for civilian control of military forces. Ethicists examine the moral dimensions of violating oaths and protocols when humanity's survival is at stake. But through it all, the fundamental truth has finally emerged, that during humanity's closest brush with nuclear annihilation, individuals on both sides recognized their common interest in survival and acted accordingly. That sometimes when systems fail, human connection becomes the last defense against catastrophe. Lily, now 17, stands beside her mother studying the carefully preserved wall drawings from their old house, now recognized as a sophisticated network map disguised as decorative art. Eleanor Walsh's legacy, preserved alongside Robert Taylor's, two pieces of a larger story about humanity's navigation of its most dangerous hour. Jack Sullivan approaches smiling as he joins them. The legal challenges have finally been resolved. Charges dropped in exchange for cooperation with historical preservation efforts. Their renovation business has thrived, specializing in historic properties with significant architectural features. And on the wall behind them, prominently displayed, is Robert Taylor's final message, his bridge across time to future generations. A reminder that even in our most divided moments, human connection remains our salvation. That sometimes the highest form of patriotism means seeing beyond artificial divisions to our shared humanity. As visitors study the exhibits, Emily watches their expressions: surprise, disbelief, thoughtful consideration. History being re-examined, conventional narratives challenge, complex truths acknowledged. Exactly what her grandfather had hoped for when he preserved these records 60 years earlier. The house that once concealed secrets now stands as a registered historical landmark. The Cipher house, where ordinary walls held extraordinary history. Where a family found not just a home, but a legacy worth preserving. Where the architecture of peace was built into the very structure, waiting for the right eyes to recognize its patterns. Emily takes Jack's hand, watching as Lily explains the network mappings to fascinated visitors. Ethan, 13, now demonstrates the technology used to enhance and decode the original recordings. A family united by purpose, by respect for truth, by understanding that history is never as simple as textbooks suggest. The cipher has been broken, the house has revealed its secrets, and the bridge between past and future stands stronger than ever. A testament to those who recognized in humanity's darkest hour that what unites us must ultimately transcend what divides us. 5 years have passed since the bridge recordings found their way to the light. Professor Abernathy's preservation efforts paid off, though not without controversy. Military historians still debate the propriety of officers acting outside chain of command. Political scientists question implications for civilian control of military forces. Ethics panels examine the moral dimensions of violating oaths when humanity's survival hangs in the balance. The old Walsh house, now officially designated the Cipher House by the National Register of Historic Places, stands fully restored. its secrets no longer hidden but honored. The walls where Eleanor Walsh concealed network maps through artistic codes are preserved behind clear panels. Visitors from around the world come to see where ordinary Americans played an extraordinary role in preventing nuclear catastrophe. Emily's legal battles with federal agencies reached an uneasy resolution. Charges of possessing classified materials were dropped in exchange for her cooperation with controlled historical preservation. The government acknowledged the legitimate historical significance while maintaining certain operational details remain sensitive. A compromise Robert Taylor would have understood, truth revealed, but with appropriate context and care. Jack Sullivan's renovation business has expanded, specializing in historic properties with architectural significance. His expertise in preserving structural integrity while honoring historical elements earned national recognition. The treehouse he built with Ethan still stands in the backyard of the Cipher house, a reminder that even in the shadow of global crisis, children need spaces to dream. Lily, now studying art history in college, has become an unexpected authority on Cold War communication systems disguised as artistic elements. Her senior thesis examining Eleanor Walsh's network maps caught the attention of intelligence historians. The young woman who once resented moving to a dilapidated house now lectures on how art served national security in ways few could imagine. Colonel Coleman died last year, peacefully in his sleep. His memorial service brought together aging veterans from both sides of the former Iron Curtain. Men who once targeted each other through periscopes and radar screens united in honoring someone who understood that patriotism sometimes means seeing beyond borders to our common humanity. The publication of The Bridge: Unauthorized Heroes of the Cuban Missile Crisis sparked renewed debate about the nature of service and duty. Some condemned the actions as undermining democratic principles of civilian control. Others recognized the moral courage required when systems fail and humanity's survival hangs in the balance. The debate itself honors those who made impossible choices in humanity's darkest hour. In Moscow, a small museum exhibition now acknowledges Soviet officers who participated in the bridge network. Their courage in reaching across ideological divides, risking execution for treason, finally receives recognition. Their families who never knew the full extent of their service stand a little taller, knowing their loved ones chose humanity's survival over blind obedience. The declassified recordings remain the most requested materials in the National Security Archive. The voices of American and Soviet officers finding common ground as the world teetered toward annihilation remind us that even in our most divided moments, human connection remains our salvation. Emily still lives in the renovated carriage house behind the main structure. From her kitchen window, she watches visitors explore the home where her grandfather preserved history that might otherwise have been lost. Sometimes she joins the tours, sharing personal reflections on Robert Taylor, not just as a crypt analyst or secret hero, but as a grandfather who loved history enough to ensure its truth survived. Systems failed in October 1962. Political leaders miscalculated. Military protocols proved insufficient against the fog of crisis. Yet individuals on both sides recognized a higher duty to humanity itself and acted accordingly. Not perfect heroes, but flawed humans making impossible choices in extraordinary circumstances. As tensions rise in today's world, the lessons of the bridge network remain relevant. The balance between institutional loyalty and moral courage. The recognition that enemies are also humans with families and futures worth preserving. The understanding that sometimes the most patriotic act is ensuring your nation avoids catastrophic error. The Cipher House stands as testament to those who served not just by following orders, but by questioning them when necessary. Who understood that loving your country sometimes means saving it from its own worst impulses. Who built bridges across ideological divides when official channels failed. Their legacy lives on, not in glorification of unauthorized action, but in thoughtful reflection on where duty ultimately lies in moments of existential crisis. Perhaps in the architecture of how we approach tomorrow's challenges, we'll find echoes of the codes once hidden in the walls of an ordinary house, waiting for the right eyes to recognize patterns of hope amid fear. Some houses hold ghosts. The Cipher House holds something more valuable, proof that even at the height of global division, our common humanity found a way forward. The truest national security, after all, lies not in weapons or walls, but in the courage to see beyond them when it matters most.